I grew up homeless in the wilderness. We got taken by the state, which ended up being a human trafficking ring. They were taking children. The sheriff, half the deputies, all went to prison. You need to have jacked feet. That is our connection to the ground. That's where the force transfer comes from.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Chris Duffin. We've been working on getting on the podcast for quite a while now. Chris is, there's a lot of accolades here, so I'm just going to list them off and then you can fill in what I forget. Former all-time world record holder in powerlifting, competed over 14 years between 2002, 2016. Best-selling author, speaker, serial entrepreneur, which we can say that now because there's several businesses where the entrepreneur thing's always been weird to me.
I agree.
When it's one business, inventor, educator, well-known in the space. Anything there I left out?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
We could throw a lot of other stuff in there.
Yes. And we got a lot to discuss. We have a crew, a Discord that kind of helps support the podcast. So I like to jump off with one of their questions that they throw out before I get into, we get into the full segment and everything. And so the question that they have, which is probably not surprising to you, is, so what happened with Kabuki?
Yeah.
Which is a long, let's go this way. Let's go, because I want to go through your history too, like origin story and all that. It kind of fits in there. So just go with the main benchmarks that people may not understand about the departure from Kabuki.
Yeah. Do you want me to go through the history kind of leading up?
Well, we'll get into that.
Okay.
Through your timeline, right? So just kind of what led to exit. How's that?
Yeah. It's an interesting thing to discuss for me because I really don't want to say, anything negative.
Yeah.
And, there's lots of things swirling around out there. And what I'm trying to do is focus on where I'm at and moving forward. And I can say I'm very proud of what I built there and what I accomplished during the time. Being able to start a company from my garage and build that into, an internationally recognized brand. I mean, I was working with 90% of every professional sport team out there in North America, at least. I could go at F1 race, it was everywhere. I mean, close to 1,000 different colleges. There was, awards for scientific innovation, product design, all of that, and really created, standardized some of these product categories that might used to have been here's a product that somebody made in their garage and there's a few available to here's the reason why, and this is something that isn't powerlifting. This is human movement fundamentals. And what I'm most proud of there is just I know this isn't kind of addressing the question yet. I'll get there. And a lot of people don't really realize what was happening with the products. In a lot of podcasts today, there's a lot of science-based influencers talking about this top-down approach, the brain's impact on all the downstream areas. And really what I was doing there was very unique and actually tapping in to the peripheral nervous system network and then controlling the inputs to the brain, which then controlled the outputs, right? And no one else was really doing that. And that sounds fancy, but it's just where the load is placed and how that affects the neurological system and the inputs to the brain, where we could literally turn off, stability, pain mechanisms, things like that. And so, I'm really, really proud of that. I started it, like I said, out of my garage and built that into, an 8-figure company over the course of several years. And I got to a point where I was doing everything. I was responsible for marketing the product, being on podcasts, designing the products. And I was also responsible for, running manufacturing, engineering, all this, because that literally is my background. For 20 years, I did business turnarounds in the manufacturing segment, like aerospace, automotive. That's when we first met. That's what I did. And so it was natural to do that. And it got to be in 2020, I'm like, I can't do all of this. I need to step back. And so at the beginning of 2020, I stepped back from that and I tried to hire some people to come in and run that were proficient. Like I know skilled people in that arena of running manufacturing operations, running engineering. And
let me jump in real quick because I think I can fill some gaps you may not want to say.
Okay.
And when you do something like that and you're working in manufacturing, which most people who are listening to this don't understand the difference between a gross margin and a net margin, right? So when you're working in an industry where the margins aren't what people perceive them to be, and then you have to hire people to take the positions that you're talking about, you're not talking about a low salary position. No. So what you're talking about is a big change.
These are high six-figure employees.
Yeah. So you're looking at a big change that's going to impact the net.
Yes.
Right off the bat.
Yes.
So it's that right there is like a necessary risk, maybe not, right? Yeah. But for that to happen and to be able to continue down that path, orders have to scale to be able to compensate for the loss in the net.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's where there's a reasonable reason that there became a disagreement with me and some of my partners and investors in the business that said, we can't afford that. We're going to do that with some lower cost employees. We'll figure it out. We've got some smart kids. They'll figure it out. Chris, you go do your thing. And so I was essentially kind of pushed out of the operating side of the business from 2020 to late 2023. And during that time, they were not able to resolve some of those issues. And it got to a point of being quite a frustration and a negative, black mark on the brand as far as being able to fulfill orders on time and things of that nature.
Well, it's an interesting time too, because for most of the people that I'm speaking to in this industry, about June 2022, things started to click down across the board.
Across the board.
So now you have compounding things going on. So you have, a downward market trend. Which is still continuing now, at that point. So now I get what you're saying.
At the end of the day, I'm a little company here up in the Northwest Oregon.
Not
a great tax structure, not a great cost structure for employee base. Steel's coming out of the Midwest. We're transporting it there and then shipping it back across the country.
Trade manufacturing too. So your welders are not $6 an hour minimum wage people.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in the course of that, I had a couple investors and I brought in another one at that point. At this point, I'm like, I basically forced myself kind of back into the business and said, I have to come in. I have to resolve this. We also need some financing to get us out of this mess. So I brought in, a third investor. There was more investors in the business than that, but I'll say there was 3 main investors that were close to billionaires each, which is actually pretty crazy for a small little company like mine. But I think it spoke to the quality of what we were producing, the brand identity and those things. And so over the course of the next, I went and hired those appropriate people at that point in time. People that I knew were known entities came in, and over a 6 months period of time, we brought orders on time. So we were shipping on time. The saying we're 12, 16 weeks late. Like I brought it on time, and then I designed 6 new products to revamp the product line, and then started creating. The first one was the new transformer bar. And, at that point, market pressures continued to impact, and also just
well, now you have higher inventory.
Yes. So now we have inventory. We've burnt down the backlog. We have, and, the patience of the investors was wearing thin at that point. So a week before launching the new transformer bar, which was pretty crazy because I had, I think, almost 2,000 people I'd known track through to the wait list off of just my social media for that bar. But at that point, ownership had transitioned. So one of the investors had called the terms on the loan, and he had basically taken possession of the assets of the business. And so, not saying anything negative whatsoever. Just doing what he needs to do right by his investment. And at that point, I had negotiated with all the other investors deals with him to transfer the business to him. And he'd hired me as CEO at that point in time. Like I said, I'd hired some quality engineering manager, quality operations manager. We've gotten those things on point. But he decided to want to go a different direction. And at that point, I'm just an employee with the company. Yeah. And so they decided to transition the manufacturing to South Carolina. And so they loaded up all the equipment and moved everything out there. And since then, all decisions that have been made, I've not been part of. I offered to work for free as, an ambassador for the brand and to continue designing. But they didn't see the need for that. And they want to do what's best for them, and they do own the brand. And so that's their choice. So at that point, it was, me to go figure out what I'm doing, which actually was really freeing, honestly, because I just spent years not being in control of my brand. And I just gotten back in, fixed the things that I wanted to fix, but it was almost like being hostage a bit because I was ask how there's so many other things that I want to do or that I'm involved in, because and we'll dive into this in the podcast, because the things like when I talked about the design, it goes way deeper than like, here's a physical product, because it's how do all these mechanisms tie in place across all these, I'd say, key unlocks to the body. So we're talking, from how the cells operate. So it's cellular, it's neurological, it's biomechanical, like we just talked about, but the biomechanical feeds into this, right? And it's what I call hydrodynamic, which is basically supplying nutrients to the body, turning that over, vascular flow, that movement of fluids and nutrients through the body, right? And so everything that I've always done is tied into that. So even like having like a flywheel ties into how I apply peptides, right? No, I get how I apply the nutrients or the supplements that I created with Build Fast formula. Like, there are all these different pathways, sometimes and often non-redundant. And they're like, so when I show the case studies of like some of the rehab stuff that I've done, that is literally, if you ask anyone and say, this is what you've done, they'd go, that's impossible. I'm like, no, I can do that on a regular basis, but it's pulling all these different things together in these non-redundant pathways that are enhancing this physiological state, right?
So how were you able to?
So when I was, so the issue was, when I had that company and all those investors, I couldn't talk about those things.
You're constrained.
I was constrained. So even though I've been dealing with peptides since 2003, like, there's name in the industry who's been playing around with those things.
You were doing that when I first met you. I mean, what the fuck are you doing?
Right. And so it's like, there's all this other stuff, but it's like, oh, you can't talk about that because that's gray area this, or that's going to, suggest that the products don't work, or, all these other things. Like, I'd post some memes up on social media and it's like, you got to take those down. That's inappropriate. And I'm like, it's funny. Yeah. Like,
well, at the same time, there's only so much bandwidth you have, because you still have to worry about logistics, your staff issues, which are, pretty much nonstop for a while.
Oh yeah.
It's just being a business owner, which that's why I kind of wanted to dig a little bit deeper into this, because with all the entrepreneur shit that we see that's online, they don't really understand what being a business owner actually entails, or to the degree of how many times you're not going to get paid.
Yes.
It's like, make $1 million, make 100,000. It's like, there'll be years you're not going to get paid. Then you might start getting paid, but then not be able to get paid.
Well, this is kind of funny because, well, I guess not funny, but I've seen it in some of the comments, because there's been some podcasts, I guess, on the other side. I haven't listened to them, but people come in, well, I heard you were making so much money at that company. And I'm like, yes, that's what my salary said it was on the books, but I didn't get paid for 2 years. So that was in backlog. And actually, when the company got signed over, then the new owner took that, and that went in his pocket, not mine. Like, I never got that. And when he took over and hired me as CEO, I said, well, we can't afford that. So even though my salary says this, and this is what people say I was making online, I said, we're going to pay me this amount. And so I was paid significantly less for the 6 months that I got paid in the last 3 years. Right. So, and you know, this is a business. Right?
That's what I'm saying.
It's like, yeah, no, that went into accounts payable. So there's a line item that said Chris was due X amount, but the money was never paid because I knew we were not in a position to do that. So, so I think that's really ridiculous when people are going, well, somebody's saying you made this. I'm like, no, they actually made that when they took possession.
Yes.
That account payable went away.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, I really hope for the best of like what I created there and, you know, that brand name, and it's great seeing my products out there, but at the same time, it's honestly just incredibly freeing to be more, I enjoy working more in an advisory capacity. Like when you've got that day-to-day piece of the operation side, which I did step in that last, like I said, 6 months and corrected those issues, but that really kills my creativity. It's a different, because I did it for 20 years, this executive operations turnaround, like it's a very disciplined structure type process, and you have to switch to that mode. And I find that really cuts into my ability, for my thinking ability, my creativity, and the things to be able to create and connect. And that's where I think I provide the most value, and the most value in this industry is my ability to see these interconnected pieces and how those come together, and how you can facilitate that to create, you know, great things that actually transform the industry and move us forward. So I'm really excited for them, and I'm really excited for myself in this process, because I've really just enjoyed like working from home, being able to do my own thing that on the things that interest me, being able to get back to coaching people, which has been absolutely just so much fun to get back and have that connection and be able to work one-on-one with people, not just like the high level athletes that I took on very few people during the course of that. And so that has been absolutely just one, it just ups my skill sets and make sure like I've got these case studies and pieces to work on. And I just love connecting with people and being able to
take you to, because it's a gut punch. And we'll speak about resilience, because your whole story kind of builds up into that resilience, but it's still a gut punch.
Yep.
You know, so how long did it take you? And you still probably are dealing with some aspects of it. But when you get a gut punch like that, how long of a time period was it to where mentally you just like, fuck it all? You know what I'm saying? And because you got to, as you would say, you got to see it for what it is. Right. But you got to try to get out of that phase as fast as you possibly can. But sometimes that's easier said than done.
Yes. So there's a framework that I use, and I'll say that because when I tell you how fast the transition was, you won't believe me. But on the second day, I was excited. I know you don't believe me, and that's fine. And yes, there's always still some residual and things to, you know, to work through. But that was more around, hey, how am I going to make my mortgage payment? How am I going to like take care? Like there's the real life, like what am I going to do right now? You know, components of that. But I was excited going into the second day. The first day was gut punch.
Yeah.
From there, having a framework to look at things is really, really helpful. And so this is something I guide. I teach a course on this at UC Berkeley, and I'm going to start teaching it at University of Boulder, Colorado School of Business as well, around resilience and this framework that I use. So
should we go into your background before that?
Sure.
To give some context?
Yeah.
Okay, so how'd you grow up, Chris?
I grew up homeless in the wilderness, dealing with trauma and all sorts of stuff. Yes, for real. So yeah, I had a very strange upbringing in Northern California. Parents didn't want to be part of society. And, you know, we started kind of in a compound, you know, up in the mountains. You'd have to hike into it. And then Later ended up in this place. There's actually a documentary series on Netflix around it. So if you have any questions around the validity of what I'm talking about, go watch this documentary called Murder Mountain on Netflix. I was 50 miles deeper and more remote than where that took place. So, it wasn't just drug running that was going on. There's people, with machine guns in the wilderness, people disappearing. There were serial killers in the area. There was corrupt police. Like, it was.
Was that your norm though?
That was my norm.
Yeah.
That was.
So there's no contrast to that.
No. And I didn't know any, didn't know any different, like I is 6 years old. We had beams lashed up in the trees, and we were, living up there because there was rattlesnakes, and I'd climb down, and it was like, this isn't a campground that you go pay $15 for a night for. Like, we had no vehicle. You'd have to hike into this place up in the mountains. And I was being taught how to capture and handle live rattlesnakes because I'd have to protect my brother who was younger than me.
Chapter 1 of this book, by the way.
Yes.
Go ahead. Go into this.
So you want to learn about fear, which I think is funny. Like all these, like no fear, that used to be this popular thing. And even on social media, like you see all this posturing, no fear, the fucking bullshit. You don't have fear. Fuck yourself. Like really.
Yeah. You're selectively choosing the things that you're not going to fear to say no fear about.
Yeah. But it's how we look at and how we manage fear, right? And so when you're sitting there and you've got, this slithery, snake, cold skin wrapped around your arm, and you're holding it beside the jaws, and it's just looking at you and staring in those eyes. 6 years old, I remember this. And the only intent in that thing, I mean, it's to strike and kill you. Like, and if you let that fear overpower you in that moment, you freeze up, you lock up, you're dead. But if you know what to do, you've got confidence in the steps of what to do, and you respect the fear, if you're fearless, if you have no fear and you disregard the signals, fear is there for a reason. You need to respect fear. It is there for a reason. But if you're doing that, you've got that snake and you have no fear, you're dead, right? So that's some very early lessons in being able to know this is exactly what I need to do. I have fear. I need to not lock up. Here's the things that I need to do, and having confidence in yourself and the ability to execute those things. That's how you walk through those moments, right? And so those are some early lessons that I learned in the course of this. So yeah, we got taken by the state, which ended up being a human trafficking ring. And my mom figured,
how did that end up being a human trafficking?
So they were taking children from
the state.
Yes. So the sheriff and half the deputies all went to prison.
Are you feeling like you're not the man you're supposed to be? Low confidence, negative thoughts polluting your brain. That's me. I get it. I've been dealing with messed up hormones most of my life. A couple years I hooked up with Merrick Health, and it was one of the best things that I ever did. They're a health optimization platform that does advanced lab works and goes deeper than probably what you've ever seen before. What you'll get with Merrick Health is they have guided optimization and the self-service diagnosis. I personally have been using the guided optimization for the whole time I've been with him. Dry is my health coach. He does an amazing job. The second route that they have is the self-service diagnostics. This is just a DIY with your own health journey. You just head over to Merrick Health, pick the panel, and they'll send you the report. You just kind of go from there. Either way, I highly recommend them, and you can get 10% off right now. Just head over to merrickhealth.com and use the code TABLETALK at checkout.
They came into the woods, they collected us, they put us in homes, and they were selling my siblings off to a human trafficking ring. And that was how that worked. And so my mom figured this out while she was in jail and contacted the DA. And I should note, they arrested her like a year before. The the sheriff, he wasn't the sheriff then. He came, arrested my mom, because she was working on a pilot. That's what we did up there, by the way. So my parents were growing weed for a living, that's why we lived in Murder Mountain. And so there's a big, table of buds in this old mill camp, this area, in this really remote community where there used to be a logging mill. And so there's these series of cabins. Most of them didn't have electricity or running water, and we're in there. And there's a pile of buds my mom was trimming. Police show up, and my mom goes and has me run and down, a mile down the road and find where my stepdad is at a party and get him and some other people to come watch the arrest, because people are known to disappear around this police officer. He got mad, ended up taking her a couple counties over. It took a week before, dad could go get her, round up a vehicle and get out there and get her. And so then they came, that following summer to where we were living in the mountains at that point in time. And they took all of us and then moved us, which is actually, I think my first experience like disassociating was in the police vehicle. I remember just like, this is a really strange experience. Like I'm sitting there in the vehicle and I'm looking at all things. I'm just talking to the police officer, and I've got 3 sisters and my brother in the back, and they're just bawling, right? And I was just sitting there like watching myself going, what is wrong with you? Why do you have zero emotion going on right now? I'm sitting there, looking at myself, asking myself like that, because I'm just sitting there, just having a conversation, being all fine. And I'm like watching myself go, what's going on? That's not normal. Mm-hmm. And so they take us and put my mom in jail. She figures that out, works with the DA. They end up investigating. They capture the guy that had my sisters as he was trying to board a plane to leave the country. The sheriff and half the deputies went to jail because they were preying upon, these poor, underprivileged, worthless people, mountain mm-hmm. people. It wasn't just us. And our grandparents got us back, and then eventually our parents got us back and end up in Oregon. And my parents did decide to get out of the drug trade at that point in time, because it's like, okay, this is not good for the kids. and then really quickly fell back into don't want to be part of society. So we were, logging, got into mining. And so same thing, living in a trailer, living in a tent, all the way up until high school, when I finally got a mobile home with running water, electricity. I mean, there was no like kitchen, there was no doors, but we threw up some sheets, made it home.
Yeah, I upgrade. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And threw up some plywood and put a sink in and just, made do. And that was the most stable period that I had during the course of my life. Now, there was a lot of, drug and alcohol abuse and just a really unpleasant growing up experience, if I would say, if looking back on that. And
well, at the time, if it's your norm, then how do you know it's not, you know what I'm saying? How do you know that's not normal?
You don't. So it really didn't start hitting me until I was actually in my mid 30s.
Really?
And I was sitting there one day in the hot tub with my 2 oldest kids. I only had 2 at the time, and they were getting around that age. My son was like 6, and my daughter was 3, and we're sitting in the hot tub, and I'm looking at them, and so I'm getting chills right now just thinking about it. I was looking at them, and then I was thinking about myself at that age, and just the sadness just hit me. Just like I was like, oh my God. At that age, this is where I was at. And that's when I started working on my book. It was a couple years after that. And that's when it really struck home. And it was...
So when you were in high school, you didn't realize that other people weren't living the same?
Oh, I definitely realized that in high school. And I ended up, leveraging that. I wrote, so, I performed very well academically and athletically in high school. I was, okay. Anybody looking at, you listed my accomplishments, and I could have said a bunch of other ones at there. Like, I have been trying to prove myself most of my life to be worthy, to be good enough, because I wasn't. Like, I lived through that, and yeah, guess what? I came out of that wanting to be and show that I'm better than everybody. I need to show that I'm smarter. I need to show that I'm better at business. I need to show that I can lift more. Like, oh, come on. You don't think I'm not operating from a level of massive insecurities, like when it relates to like the achievements that I accomplished? Like, it's taken me a lot of time to come to terms and be like, oh, guess what? I don't need to have a kabuki or to be this or that, like, to be okay with myself anymore. Yeah, it took me a long time.
Well, when you're in it, you're in it.
You're in it. You're in it.
Yeah.
So I was applied for a bunch of scholarships, and one of the ones I applied for was the newspaper, and I wrote an essay, and they ended up publishing it as the front page.
What was it on?
It was on Part of My Life, and they came to our house, the mobile home, took a picture, and ran on the front page. Got picked up on the wire service, went all over the West Coast, and I ended up getting some donations, and then Oregon Institute of Technology called.
This is back in a different day too. So if it caught the wire service, right? Because that's the facts, right?
Yeah.
It's going in a lot of papers. People listening are not going to know what we're talking about. Yep. Like, there was no social media. There was no internet. Everything was kind of like PR driven.
Yep.
So that's crazy.
So that's ended up how I was able to get into college, because I still wasn't sure. Like, I didn't understand finances. Like, I didn't have guidance in that part. Like, don't get me wrong. My parents were really intelligent. Like, we grew up, my mom was going to school to be a chemical engineer when she had me. My father was a member of Mensa. My stepfather was smarter than him. So they were very artsy, we would sit around the stire and I was reading like incredible books at a young age and having conversations. Like, I didn't connect with other kids very well. But they didn't know how to operate. Like, they were also out there. Yeah. That's why they lived the life, because they couldn't, like, my mother died in a town of 100 people with their mining claim up in the mountain, this last spring, actually the same week that the company was taken over. Actually, days apart. She died in my arms. Yeah, that was a little rough.
Man, that's a double.
Yeah, that was a hard week. Yeah, that was a hard week.
Sledgehammer to the head.
But she never, that's the way we grew up. But that's how I ended up getting to college, and I went to school for a double engineering degree. I ended up taking custody of my sisters while I did that. So I raised all my sisters, starting around when I was a junior in college, while I worked full time, and then was working on my master's. I got a master's in business as well, and went down that whole track, raised all of my sisters through their teenage years. And
now, was school hard for you?
No.
You're one of those fuckers. I guess it balances out with the other shit.
Yeah. It's kind of embarrassing because it doesn't speak to like work ethic or discipline or anything of that nature, but I did what I needed to do to get by. I was really good at tests. I was really good at this stuff. So every term I'd show up and I'd buy the books with good intent, and I'd get 2 weeks in and I'd be like, God, I need that money, and I can get full price at this 2-week mark. And I started taking classes that had recommended homework instead of required homework. I never bought books, and I went and got a job. People didn't even believe I went to school, and I had the highest graduating engineering GPA with a dual engineering degree. I graduated. I was good at tests. Good at connect like this stuff. And
when did the training come into play? Was it during college? Was it during high? You were a good athlete.
Yeah.
So was the weight training part of that process in high school?
I was very physically active, like my whole upbringing, right? Yeah. Hauling wood. I was working with my stepdad, hauling rocks up the side of mountains. Like, we were a very physical, and my mom was an athlete too. So she was into track and field, but this is when they weren't allowed to compete. And she was like, just let me compete they were competing in the Olympics. And she was, I'm told, my mom has a tendency to exaggerate, but that she was throwing on the discus and javelin close to what they were throwing. I mean, she is a very physical woman. I mean, I watched her in her 60s up on the mining claim outwork people on a regular, like, just give me that. She'd have people up there in the open pit. And I'm like, Mom, you got to slow down. She had a lot of muscle and was a very physical person. And yeah, she was like in high school, wanted to compete against the men because she was good. They didn't, but they wouldn't allow her, even though she would beat them. And my stepfather was into physical culture as well. So I started training when I was in junior high. And at first it was doing jump squats with like ankle weights and running, and then doing push-ups. And I just do them till failure. I'd go down to the school and I'd run until I couldn't run anymore. Again, think about why, but that was my escape. And then in high school, that's how I got into athletics, because I'm like, well, I'm strong. I guess I should go try out for wrestling. And I was pretty good at that. And yeah, it stuck with me. In college, I spent several years drinking way too much. So there was a few years where I didn't train. And then I started training again just to stop myself from drinking. And it's been with me my whole life. And then, I started.
At what point did it click? Like, this is something. I guess it's safe to say that this is something I want to build my identity on, where you've come through that. But at that time, you know what I'm saying? At that time.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was the poor kid that lived in a trailer down by the river. Yeah. Literally. Right. And that's how I saw everybody's perception of me. It wasn't until I was a senior when they wrote that article about me, and people in the school were coming up to me and they're like, I had no idea that nobody really had those perceptions or looked at me that way.
So you thought that's what they all thought.
I thought that's what they all thought, right? And in younger years too, part of that perception was definitely brought on by teasing and other stuff. It didn't happen at that school that I went to high school with, but prior to that, I didn't, you started turning a teenager, you started smelling. I didn't have the opportunity to bathe, because literally it was like during the summer, filling up a jug in the creek and setting it on a rock all day long so it gets warm so you can take a shower. And during the winter, heating something up on the wood stove and stepping out in the snow and trying to wash. Like, it didn't happen that often, right? So I get teased for smelling, and my clothes were from the Salvation Army and they were dirty and torn, and my toes would be sticking out of my shoes. Like, that's the world I lived in. So I was teased about that sort of thing, particularly prior to high school. Like I said, I had a stable-ish environment in high school, and I was working and making money in high school. Now, half of my wages were usually stolen from me by my parents to buy beer. But wake up in the it's reality. And I figured it was, it was like my part of giving to the family, because I'm like, well, they're using that money, but they're using the other money to buy food, I'm like, whatever. So, I lost track of the question.
Well, in college.
Oh, yeah. So the training. So that was my perception of myself. And so I was also, National Honor Society. I was valedictorian. Like, I was the nerd, and then I was the homeless kid that was dirty and smelly. Right. So yeah, lifting was big for my self-confidence, like massive. Like, that was a game changer. The person before I was lifting and the person after I started lifting was a very different individual, even at that young age. So that is, I of course, that had a massive impact, and I took to it. Like I said, I had good genetics. I had good genetics for recovery, and I was fucked in the head. Yeah. Like, so yeah, I was gonna do well from lifting. Put a kid like that in the gym, and he's gonna train hard, and he's gonna respond well, and I did. So yeah, I was known as the strong kid too.
So after college, you go into the corporate sector, and then when did the competing come into play?
Yeah. So I was training. So I was working. I was in the middle of my MBA program. And I I'd moved across the state because, again, my drinking friends had stayed with me. And so I was out of college. I owned a house. I was raising a couple of my sisters at that time. But I'd come home and there'd be a kegger at my house. And I'd drink all, I'd work out during the week. It'd take me till Wednesday when the booze smell would quit sweating out of me. And I just couldn't get away from it. Even though I was performing, like I felt like I was dying. I really did. And so I got in my Jeep and I drove from one side of the state to the other side of the state, crashed in a friend's house, applied for some jobs, and got another job and started my MBA program. I'm like, I'm cleaning myself up. And my oldest of the two sisters was 18 and she had a job. And I said, hey, the house is yours, make payments to me. And took the youngest sister with me, got a place and started. I was just like all in. I'm going to school for my MBA, got my sister, exited myself from some, bad relationships or one that were unproductive. They're just wrong point in life. And I needed to be in a different spot. And I was going to the gym every day and I'm sitting there. I was, of course, really strong. And there was a couple guys prepping for a bodybuilding show. And man, they look good. They look good. They were big. I'd run circles around them every day in the gym. And I'm just like, they're bigger than me. They look better than me. And I'm like, I'm never going to be, because I did grow up to the Arnold Schwarzenegger, encyclopedia. I had Bill Pearl's book. Like I'd always that's all I knew was bodybuilding. I'm like, I'm going to look up a bench press competition. So they're prepping for this bodybuilding show. And I'm like, I'm going to do a bench press competition. So I search online and I find this bench press and deadlift competition. I'm like, deadlift. Yeah, I think I remember seeing a picture of Franco Colombo do that. So I hit up this trainer and he's like, yeah, I'll teach you how to deadlift. And he put some knee wraps on me and had me deadlift. So I'm deadlifting with these knee wraps.
I get it. Yeah.
There wasn't, this is 2000. There's not even that much internet, at that point in time. There's no social media. It's not in the magazines. Like it's a pretty obscure sport. The period of time.
Yeah.
So I show up at this bench press and deadlift competition. I've got this Harbinger Velcro belt, and they're like, "You can't use that." And I'm like, "What?" So I borrow some belt from some guy, and I did the bench press and deadlift competition. 523 deadlift, by the way, 523, and I think I benched 440. It was 198 or 220 at the time. I think it was 220 because I didn't cut any weight. And I got done with the day and I was like, yeah, so I'm doing this the rest of my life. It was just, I don't know. It was just like, it was just so much fun. It just felt like my people, it was a great experience. I had to lean on people because I didn't know what was going on. Everybody was so helpful. Hey, use my belt. Here's this bench press shirt. Throw this thing on. Here's how you do it. And I'm like, back then there was just an Inzer thingy that
blast shirt.
Blast shirt, no idea. I'm like, I benched the same as what I did raw,
It just hurt more.
It hurt. Yeah. Tore up my armpits. And so, that was in 2000. I'm like, okay, I'm doing this. And I did that.
And what, pretty much every time. Did it go from the bench only to this? I want to get the biggest total and all-time world records and all the other things that you did.
Yeah. So I think it was around 2000. So I did the Wabital from 2000, 2003. I was a junior and I kept, setting all the junior records for the state. And then after that, I think it was 2005, I did my first powerlifting competition. It was USAPL. And then I got busted for taking some, I don't know, it was something I took at GNC, what was it? The
Androstenedione.
Androstenedione. I think I deadlifted 650, squatted 550. That was my first squat competition. And then it was a 500 something bench. That was in 2005. And then, I don't know, somewhere in there was I started just looking at all the records, all the federations. And I'm like, I want these. and first it was like, I'm going to just start, I started moving around to federations to try to like, I need to get those. And by 2008, this is when I met Rudy. I showed up he was putting on nobody in the Northwest was doing competitions. Like it just fell apart.
Yeah.
So Rudy was a master's lifter, same thing. He got into powerlifting and was like, I guess I got to put on meets. And so he's putting on this meet. I call him up. I'm like, hey, what kind of bar you got? What's this? And he's like, I didn't know. And I'm like, well, I'm showing up at the meet. I'm bringing my bars. And I'd like show up at a meet and they didn't have a monolift. So I built the monolift and drove it on a trailer to the meet. Mm-hmm. Just so, like I built it in my in my driveway because I'm like, I'm gonna do this. So I'd show up and squat 950, and it was just like I'm gonna make sure everything's there to just like be able to pull off what I'm gonna pull off. And yeah, I chased that for quite some time. Then I started getting more serious about it. So I set which now the records will probably stand forever, because I've got the double APF. So that's the drug tested multiply. Yeah. Records. I own all of them.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll probably stand forever because who does?
Yeah, nobody's going to do it.
Nobody does that. So my last drug tested meet was when I was 33, double APF nationals, but I totaled like 2254, something like that. Anyway.
At what point did your nerd brain flip to how do I optimize performance? Because it didn't just happen. Like it was a build up. Yeah. Right. Because as you mentioned earlier, the peptides, you were using those before anybody.
Yeah. So I started that 2003 to 2005. Yeah. So technically I'm like, oh, that probably wasn't legal when I did the USAPL either. Yeah. Right. But I started there because I was like, I don't want to touch, I was very, anti-steroids, and everybody thought I was on them in those days anyway. But I guess I took the one andro too, or the androstenedione. Yeah, sure. Anyway.
That counts.
So
Mark McGuire got busted for it. So. You know what works? Consistency, hard training, and the right fuel. My friend John Meadows built Granite with that exact mindset. He didn't believe in gimmicks, he believed in products that deliver. Two of my daily staples are creatine and Meadows Whey. The creatine helps me recover and stay focused, while the protein helps me meet my daily requirements. I will mix my protein in with my morning coffee and add it to my oatmeal. While training, I'll also toss in creatine with whatever I'm drinking. Creatine and whey are the same staples that John used, and I recommend them to anyone serious about their training. Supporting Granite isn't just about supplements, it's about continuing John's vision and legacy in this industry. Visit granitenutrition.com and use the code TABLETALK for 10% off your order. Train hard and support the legacy.
Yes. So from the very beginning, as soon as I did that first powerlifting meet, like I started developing all the spreadsheets, figuring out, like I was looking at some of the Russian periodization schemes, and I was building these out and putting in all the numbers in and seeing like just different ways I play with the set and rep schemes to get the volume and intensity. And so like, I just went like, that's what I do.
So like I
just went full in. And so I still have records all the way from that time with like, I've got every supplement I was taking by week, every week, my body weight every single day for the last 20 years. Like it's all just there. Yeah. Like that's just what I do. Like it's my ADHD, just like.
So your old training log before it was even on our site, the training log was detailed. Let's just put it that way. Like and you could look at it and be like, who the fuck spends this much time putting all this data in there?
Yeah. So I started that in 2007 on a bunch of, so it was on bodybuilding.com, Anabolic Minds. I think it's still one of the most viewed threads on Anabolic Minds is my old training program, which was from like 2007. And I carried all those up until I was doing the Elite FTS, but I'd have daily training videos, the detail write-ups, like just and I did that up until 2018-ish. So for 10 years. And then, so I think I have the longest running if I can say running, because it's not too consistent anymore
yeah.
by any means. I did do a couple YouTube posts, video log recently, but if I was to consistently be doing it now, I don't think anybody has a video training log out there.
Well, for context,
longer than what I've been doing.
Mean, it's you couldn't record it on your phone back then either. You know, it was like some kind of flip, digital camera. So you'd have to record it, download it.
Yep.
Edit it into software. Right. So exactly. So it was way more cumbersome than what it would be today.
Yes.
Which thinking, I don't know if people can understand. We can understand it because we've lived through it. The amount of time and work it goes into all that. That was the other part. Like it was like all sets. It's like, oh my God, this is like a 5-hour process, that you systemized it. It's your MBA kind of probably came in helpful there, project management, to be able to systemize it all out. But even shortly, somewhere during that time, you were measuring bar speed.
Yeah.
Way back.
Yeah. So it was 2010. So you, Louis, everybody was talking bar speed.
Yes.
And I was like, no, it's not about moving the bar faster. I want to understand my neurological readiness. Like I want to know what my potential is and use that for my max effort work. And maybe there's some people that are doing that before. I don't know, but I ordered one of the early units from GymAware from Australia, I think around 2010. And I started using that. And that's when I started playing with velocity drop-off points and then mapping, creating this map of where being able to essentially project where your daily 1RM is. So on any warm-up set, I'd know exactly where I was, right? So you can, you're not a 500 pound bencher. You're a 507. You're a 454. Like it's variable based on the level of fatigue masking that you have going on, right? And so knowing where you're at and taking opportunities of those moments too, even when you're perceiving, like I feel like I'm really beat up, I should back off. And it's like, no, the numbers are there. Like your perception isn't reality, and we can push this. I can get another set in. So I start building these parameters that I would train within.
So early on, was your bias when it said that you should back down? No, I just need to try harder. When it said you could go harder, you went harder.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was working halfway.
Yes. Yeah. And I initially got it to focus on backing myself down because I'm a very ego-driven lifter. Anybody that looks at my training can see that, like that it has been. And I wanted to try to have an objective measure to tell me when not to. But then I quickly found with myself and the gym members that I had that there was so many of these like micro opportunities where you could be pushing it harder during a cycle as well. And when you timed appropriately being able to do that, you got a lot more out of the training cycle. And I really think that that's the thing that really, when I started doing that, that's when I started taking off. That's when, things just, that and the movement piece were just, they're just like rocket fuel tossed on there. It's like, hey, you're squatting 700. You're squatting 900. Like, in 6 months, like it was just massive. But yeah, it became very clear that velocity is effort-based training, but it would force you to do the effort instead of, I got to do one more and you get through and get it done versus I don't get to do another set unless I display the effort on this set and meet the parameters. Mm-hmm. So it forced you to put the effort in to display the metrics instead of just getting the sets and reps done. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, it makes total sense, but I'm trying to put myself where you were at that time. Yeah. Right. Which you're trying to balance out the ego lifting part.
I was.
Right.
And I didn't necessarily do that.
Exactly. But over time, you overreach enough that you realize this isn't working because it doesn't help when I'm hurt. Now, you mentioned the movement piece, which I remember speaking to you years ago about, I think it was a deadlift that you were trying to do, and you weren't able to pull it, but you took more time trying to, I think correct me if I'm wrong and retell the story. You're at a meet and it's not going. Yeah. And then you just took more time. to be able to set it up. And then it came up like that. And so tell that story. But my question is, was that a catalyst to really start looking at the movement a little bit more?
It wasn't. Yes and no. Okay. Let me tell that story, and then let me tell you the bigger catalyst.
Got it.
Which is, well, you can't see the scars much anymore. Tattoos over it.
They go away over time, but they're there.
I call it the day I learned to deadlift. I had been chasing, like, I was a 700-pound deadlifter. I could pull in the low sevens, but meet day, I was just never putting it together. Just wasn't happening. I kept trying to get, and so I would pull 677, jump to 720, miss it. And I just kept trying. I'm like, man. And so I'm prepping for this meet. 3 weeks out from the meet, I hurt my back. Like, I can't sit up out of bed. It's one of you got to get in the right position, roll over, get out. And so I'm dealing with this for, 3 weeks going into the meet. And I'm like, I'm not training a lot, but I'm feeling better. And so I get in and I do my squat. I squatted like 850, 900, something like that. And I go do the bench, set up on the arch, my back tightens up. So now it's coming to the deadlift. My opener's 650 because I'm going to go 650, 780 or 680, 720, something like that, right? And 585s on the bar in the warm-up room. I go to pull it. I get it like 2 inches off the ground. Pain. Like I can't deadlift 585. And this is a meet. I'd also done all the setup. I was the meet promoter too. So I'd set up all the equipment. That probably laid into my fatigue, but everybody knew who I was. And they're like, oh, what are you going to do? You know, back your opener down? You got to get those other records in the book. And I'm like, no, I got it. I don't know. It just clicked in my head. I have this. This happened similar to when I went all the way through in high school, went all the way through districts and all the way to the final match in state without having a single point scored against me. And I'd been beaten by 4 people during the course of the season that I had to face in districts one after another. And, a week before I was just like, I'm going to beat them. I just know I'm going to beat them. And I told my wrestling coach and he said, you just said it you just knew it was the future. He's like, I believed you. He's like, I didn't have any reason to believe you, but I just knew you were going to do it. And the same thing. I'm like 650, no problem. I'm fine. I'm like, I just got to get in the right position. I got to get in that perfect position. And when I'm right there, I have no pain. I feel if I can just get there. So I walk out there and I grab that bar and I start pulling into position. I'm like, you're pulling and it's getting tight and you're ready and everything just says lift, 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 lift. It's time to lift. I'm like, no, not yet. Just a little bit more. And I just a little. And then all of a sudden I got into this position. I'm like, there it is. I just stood up. It's like nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. So I pulled 700 next. Same thing. So I'm a 198 natty at this time too, by the way. I don't even think on the andro.
Peptides.
Maybe some peptides there. Maybe some peptides. And we're going to pull 750. I walk out. It's getting tight. Everything's screaming at you. Like, you should go. No, just keep clicking it. Boom. I could feel it. Everything in my body said, you're in position. You can fire now. 750 shot up. And everybody's like, you going to go for a 4th? I'm like, yeah, I don't know what to pull. This old guy that I knew been competing with for a long time. He's like, you know what you're going to pull. And I'm like, you're right. I do. 801. Going to go 800. So I never was a 700-pound meat deadlifter. I never was a 700-pound deadlifter.
Yeah.
I went straight. So that I pull in, I just everything straight and I pull and I mean, it just kept going. It kept going. I'm pulling the hips through. I'm locking it out. And I'm standing there. staring. I did the head move against the crowd. Look at everybody. Freaking set it down. 801, 198. Yep, that was my never was a 700 pound deadlift.
Yeah.
It was around so that was a lesson on being in right position in the neurological components that can have an effect, right? That being able to shut down those mechanisms in the body. So if we think about this from like a mechanical perspective, it's these threat signals, and the body is trying to keep you safe. And we build the same mechanisms into vehicles, for example. You just had some snow and ice this winter. A lot of people, we've got the traction control, especially the electric cars. I drove out here in a Tesla. If they start slipping a little bit, what's it do? Well, it's not taking the power that's from the wheel that's slipping and sending it to the gripping. It's actually just detuning. Power output goes down. The signals from the brain say reduce power output, reduce the shift patterns on the vehicle, and that's going to keep you safe. So when we have instability or not great positions, those things come into place. And that's why it's not lifting heavy doesn't make you lose mobility, but lifting like shit does. So when you're doing that, now the body starts tightening the muscles around that joint to try to protect it, but also weak. Like if I've got a weak foot and ankle, that's why I have Bearfoot Shoes to help people get strong feet and ankle, because the same things start happening around that joint. The body wants to protect it. So it detunes you neurologically. It reduces your output. And I could see it in my velocity measurements. So the more I dialed that, I could also see the impact of like, boom, all of a sudden, if I got somebody's change in their head and neck position, right? Boom, you would see their velocity 10% up, like when we'd reduce these threat signals, telling the body we're in a safe place to play. Now that was a huge one because I had a potential, for let's say a disc injury or something like that. The body, that's what the pain signal was.
Yeah.
Be present of those signals. Like it's there for a reason. If I wasn't in that perfect position, I was compromised and a potential of hurting myself. So the body was trying to help me not hurt myself. But if I could shut those signals off, boom, my performance went through the roof. Freaking pulled 801, I couldn't pick up 585 in the weight room. And I walked out and pulled 801.
Well, it's part of that just being in a better stacked position.
Yes. So later as I learned this, and this is like, as we started to get to know each other early on, this was a point in powerlifting where I was talking about concepts that I was getting ridiculed a lot for because it was the opposite of what everybody was saying.
Yes, which was intriguing to me.
Yeah. And you were there was a few people that engaged with me on this and were interested in learning more. So this happened. I detached one of my two heads of my left pec, and I met this Dr. Philip Snell, who he's like, hey, we can work on that, but I've got some greater concerns. And he's around, it's around, your position and how you're moving. And I'm like, what's this skinny doc got to tell me? And he did a few tests and showed me a few things. I'm like, whoa, that was interesting. And so got to go all in. And he was open. He's like, I don't have all the answers, but here's my thoughts. Let's collaborate on this. He's like, oh, you want to learn? Hey, here's some courses to go to. So I started taking clinical continuing ed on this stuff called dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, which, by the way, was hugely anti-lifting.
Oh, yeah.
It still is.
Yeah.
Staying hydrated is huge for training and performance. And this is why today's episode is brought to you by Element. Element gives you exactly what your body needs: 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, 60 milligrams of magnesium, 0 sugar, and no junk. Personally, I like to mix half a pack with my morning oatmeal. I'll use any of the chocolate flavors. I drink it with all my training sessions, watermelon being my favorite. Some other reasons why I use it is stable energy with no crash. It fights off fatigue and cramps, improves mental focus and clarity, helps regulate stress, and supports deeper sleep. And there's no sugar and garbage. Here's the best part. You can try it totally risk-free. Right now, Element is offering a free 8-count sample pack of its most popular flavors with each purchase. You get 2 of each of these 4 fan favorites, perfect for finding your own favorite or sharing with a friend. Don't like it? Give it to a salty friend and Element will give you your money back. Head over to www.drinklmnt.com/table talk.
But I went in there and I started, even though they were anti-lifting, I'm like, I see they actually don't know that, because they're not pushing their system with load where they're not actually maybe doing it the way that they think that they're doing it. And I started applying it and putting those principles together in that realm. And it did come back to like what I did in that deadlift, which was just getting that really great stack in relationship of pelvis to diaphragm and being able to expand, and then the signals that happen from that, right? And there's a lot more complexity to that, but at the time, everybody was chest up and out and push the hips way back, creating this massive open scissor, which did tighten up the squat suits and things like that as well. And I started putting this stuff into play, and my squat just and my deadlift just started going through the roof. Like, I'm sitting there in training, I'm like, oh, I think I'm going to double 900 today for deadlift. Like, okay, like where is this coming? Like, I mean, it was just massive. And I started putting this in place with other people. And, you know, I'd been in shoulder pain for 8 years, you know, where you try to go to sleep at night and it's like just throbbing and it hurts. And of course, there were some 500-pound 500-pound benchers at my gym that had similar experience. I'm like, hey, try this, taught them some stuff. And, you know, we'd swing the mace where I'd try to reinforce the patterns. And they come back a few weeks later and like, dude, I'm out of pain. Like, this is crazy. And yeah, the people I started coaching, and then other people started following these same principles. And that dove into, you know, the foot mechanics side of it as well.
Yeah, before we get to the foot, what I think was going on, because you have the context too to kind of look back in hindsight, is with the old cues, the internet's kind of new, right? So if I'm telling somebody, look, you need to arch and do this, and they're 275 pounds and they have erectors like 2 liters, what I'm actually saying is get your back tight and depress your shoulders, because they're not actually looking like a banana. And when I would start doing seminars and find people that are 6'4", 180, and they'd be arching super hard, be like, what the fuck are you doing? Well, I'm doing what you said. And it's, oh, wait, right? So then, you know, when it comes full circle, it's like that cue was a cue that worked for a population of people that weren't actually doing what we were saying.
Yes.
You know, and then when they would brace, which it became better explained over time, the diaphragm would fall because they're pushing into their belt, which
but there was a lot of people like they would brace by tightening and constricting and doing almost a crunch in this extended position.
Yes.
So yeah, when I started traveling, I showed up here. I did some coaching at the Elite FTS events. I showed up at Donnie Thompson's gym and I watched him and what he was doing with his athletes. And I'm like, when I go to meets all around the country, nobody's actually doing what you guys are doing. They're following the verbiage and they're just repeating it and what I call parroting these statements. And 95% of people are all doing it completely different than what the...
Yes. So it took people like yourself to basically call that other shit out, right? And at the time, the majority of the people were pushing against it because it wasn't part of the cult mentality or whatever it was. Instead of trying to listen, like, what exactly is he saying? And for me, it was like the tin can, right? Then it was like, oh, I get it. You know what I'm saying? And then you look in hindsight, like the end result was true for this population and this group. And because you know this just from coaching people over the vast array of time, one cue for one person, you may have to change the cue just to make it work and hope to God it doesn't go online.
Yes. Yeah. Because what you'd say somebody, because I might use some of those cues that I'm saying, not with certain people, if they get the response that I want.
Yes. And that's what happened, you know, from the onset. And it's because, you know, we weren't educators, you know, just people in the gym working with other people of similar demographic, putting the content out, but not seeing the ramifications of that content until you would go out and see the content. And then, this is part of the reason, just the brace itself, before we even get into the foot mechanics, the brace itself, I think, is responsible for a lot of the trajectory that we've seen in powerlifting over the past decade, for sure.
Yep.
Would you agree?
I would agree. Like what we're seeing today, the lifts that are, people are regularly outlifting multiply as raw lift. Like it's just like the numbers are just absolutely insane. But if we're able to lift and sustain that higher volume and intensity in shorter periods of time and be able to recover from that and going up, you're going to stay with it longer. We're going to get the results that we're starting to see, and we're seeing that compounding now with these lifters, because that was what I tried to do with this, is create a philosophy in a way that could be communicated from one person to the next person and down the line. And I don't think I've ever told you this, but I have to say thank you. We had a call, or it was one of the meetings, I can't remember. No, it was a phone call early on we had when I was an elite FTS athlete, and you said, hey, you should create a system that is the assessment and correction, not an FMS or some of the others, based off of a squat, bench, and deadlift. And that was the foundation of what I built the movement systems off of, was that thought process of doing this. How do we not, okay, there's times that we may have to deviate out and do some specific technique or corrective exercise or all this, but that's fluff. We should be able to do it in the movement. How do I change what somebody's doing with the foot or their pinky or all these other things within that, so we don't have to do an overhead squat to do an assessment. We can see
right there.
it.
Yeah.
If I can teach people to see that in the squat and then make that correction in the squat, we never go anywhere, because the progress happens in the squat. It happens in the loaded movement.
Yeah.
We have to have all that other stuff is just teaching and reinforcing. We don't get adaptation until we get load. So if we never have to go anywhere, and so that entire philosophy of everything that I built that company around, even the equipment, was all tied to facilitating those things to happen, was all built around that idea that you mentioned in as a 30-second
well, you ran with
call. And I'm like, that's it. And I built the whole thing off of that single, sentence.
What was the driver of paying more attention to the foot?
I had been messing around with shoes for a long time. So we
kind of all do.
Yeah.
Well, the boots make me stronger. Whatever makes you stronger, try it.
So I was cutting them up. I was doing different soles, and
even before that, it was the foot mechanics, or was it the shoe first?
It was the foot mechanics. So I did foot mechanics with no shoe for 6 years. There's a bunch of Duffin foot love memes, going around making fun of me. I think they're hilarious. And because it would just got to be synonymous, but that was a piece that I did pick up in the DNS world. So as I was doing this stuff, the relation of the foot, and it did make a lot of sense to me. And I started doing a lot of training without shoes. And as my foot got stronger and that complex got stronger in my control, it started, again, playing a role with that. And I would be able to, again, do things with people's foot instantly and get results. And so, I just did a deep dive on that and kept going on the different mechanisms and approach and the impact of that. And so about 6 years into teaching foot mechanics and just being here's this, people kept pushing back on me going, well, what do you recommend? And I'm like, well, none of the shoes really I didn't have anything to recommend. And, the recommendation of just go shoeless, it doesn't work for people training in commercial gyms, and doesn't work in life necessarily. So it really was as an output of that to create the Bearfoot brand. And, part of that is a little bit just design aesthetic, I guess, as well, because there are some decent, even though at the time, a lot of those minimalist shoes still were not designed appropriately in my mind. Like the toe box was still narrow. There were still some issues, and still today a lot of them have a wrap on the sole that eliminates the torsional movement of this, which is really critical. The foot doesn't really have a torsional plane, but I call it a torsional plane because the frequency of the inner arch and outer arch operate at different frequencies. So as you're moving the foot, it literally does twist, even though it doesn't really have a torsional plane. And the ability to be able to do that and engage the big toe, which is really critical, is still impacted in a lot of those shoes. But the other side of it is like, those shoes are, I live in Portland. This isn't a knock. Like they're for vegans and hippies. Like, it's like, well, I'm not big on like, leather is one of the best materials you can have for a shoe. Like, it's breathable. It doesn't retain smells. It's warm. So it works in the winter. It works in the summer. Like, synthetic materials, I'm not necessarily a big fan of, right? And also just the design aesthetic. Like, I laugh, but it's birth control. Like, I mean, like, so I'm just telling the truth, right?
Yeah.
So just stating.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true.
And so we created my partners with Bearfoot. So I had these gentlemen from North Dakota that kept pushing me. They wanted to create a sock inspired by my background, a toe sock, a training sock for deadlift. And so they flew out a couple times. I'm like, all right, guys, we're going to do this, but we're not going to do socks. We're going to do shoes. Let's do this. And so we ended up launching the Bearfoot brand, which is really the antithesis to all these other companies. We use natural materials. We've got more of a blue collar aesthetic and vibe. We've got a boot line that's a really, like, we've got one that's handmade in the United States. And it is like, you could, wear it out as a dress boot if you wanted. That's what I save it for, date night with the wife. It's the opposite of birth control,
Well, it's no longer stinky clothes either. So. I don't know. Maybe it
is. So yeah, that was the essence, of that. And within that too, like thinking about those things, like we've got the lowest durometer sole. So when you grab that ground and you want to stick and, and it's funny because like I don't recommend because they'll break down if you wear them. But I've had people like, oh yeah, I wore them in the river as water shoes, and they're like they grab the mossy rocks better than. I'm like, yeah, that's because of the material. Now our construction isn't meant to be submersed in water. And yeah, and it's gotten to be. I mean, there's been a whole shift in the industry now. A lot of like in powerlifting, a lot of the competitors, because at first people thought our shoe was just like, oh, it's a deadlift shoe. I'm like, no, this is a life shoe. This is a lifestyle, because if you wear this is going to strengthen your foot. And so, yeah, this is another thing. Up front, people were like, this is silly. This is stupid. Like, where's the science behind this? Show me the science. Show me the science. I'm like, what do you mean the science? That was my argument then. By the way, I have the science now. There's tons of research around this, and we'll touch on some of it. But it's like, since when is the foot different than any other part of your body? Why do you treat the foot different than any other part of your body? You need to move it. You need to strengthen it. If you don't, it gets weak. If it's weak, those compensatory patterns, those protection mechanisms kick in. Like, if I wake up every morning and I go, my elbow hurts, I'm going to put an elbow wrap on it. There's a time and place for that. But if I do that all day, every day, this arm's going to get weak. It's going to get injured, or I might injure this one or this shoulder or something else. Well, that's what
that statement that you made.
It's no different than the rest of the body. And now we know this without a doubt. So like, if I take my hand like this and I squeeze this, we can actually see it already start to happen, but the blood flow starts cutting off. Well, if I'm not able to clear the waste products, if I'm not able to strengthen the muscle, what happens? The process of atrophy and degeneration starts kicking in, like, immediately. So let's take some recent research. 96% of those cases of plantar fasciitis.
That's where I was going to go. Yeah.
Plantar fasciitis. Overuse of the foot that needs you to rest and recover and wear arch support, so passively pushing you into position so you can do that, because we need to rest and recover because you've overused that fascia on the foot. 96% of those cases, if you do imaging on those, MRI, so this is confirmed in MRI studies, ultrasound studies, and biopsies, 96% of those cases are underuse. Lack of blood flow, atrophy of the muscle, and degeneration of all the ligaments, tendon material as a result of this. Underuse. Now, does that mean I'm saying go hog wild on strengthening it? No, the foot's just like every other part of the body. You have to build into it. You have to build resilience. No, that's the other counter.
We talked about this a lot.
The lawsuits with the Vibram shoes and that's because people, they went, those are better. Put them on. I'm going to go run 20 miles every day.
Yeah, you may not remember this, but years ago, I had a conversation with you about this because I was in arch supports for 4 years, right? Because the chiropractors that I were seeing was, this is what's causing the hip issues and all the other kind of stuff. And I wouldn't wear them to squat, right? I'd take them off for that. But the plantar fasciitis was so bad that just getting out of bed and going to the bathroom, I'd have to use a towel to slide, to move myself because just waking up. And what you told me was just don't wear any shoes, for when you're at home, for as long as you can, and then slowly over time move out of that. And I haven't used the supports for 4 years. And it didn't take that long because that just walking around barefoot just started to strengthen. And you said, start to strengthen a little bit, and just by doing that. Then after that, we get into some of the crazy, stupid, use a newspaper, that kind of whatever. And, use those type of things. And then you transition out. Then my ability to be able to squat became better connected. Because this is where I think a lot of the lifters miss this, is the foot mechanics, because I've had people tell me, because I will start with people if I'm teaching them to squat with the feet, feet first, then we work up. I've had, other people that like to start with the core, because once you put load on, the feet's going to take care of itself. I'm like, once you put load on, it's harder to teach them, what to be able to do with their feet. It's the hardest when it's just a bar. Or you know what I'm saying? Because then they're moving around, and the ability to for me just personally to feel the force, that's where it's starting. If you can't produce the force into the ground and it can't be transferred through your torso, to get to the bar, you're not displaying your maximum output.
Yeah, and that's almost nearly any sport. I mean, factor out, swimming and other things, but any sport where we're connected to the ground, which is most, that is our connection to the ground. That's where the force transfer comes from, being able to put that to some distal end. It's incredibly important. And I didn't realize it because I'd always encourage people to do strength training of the foot specifically as well. But the research has now come out that just wearing that minimalist shoe does as much as a dedicated foot and ankle strengthening program. Now, I still recommend people do both. So that's pretty easy. That might be, doing a half foot off of a block, while doing single leg deadlifts and other stuff. You don't have to do special exercises just for it. You can incorporate it into the things that you're doing, but just allowing the opportunity for that foot to move so we can get blood flow and breathe and clear, supply the nutrients. So this is, the hydrodynamic piece of this, and then clear the waste products. And that's huge. Add some muscle tissue to it. You need to have jacked feet. If you want to be strong at the end of the day, you need a jacked foot. Even if you're going to wear, I'm not anti-lifters or anything like that. If that gets you in a better position and you squat more on it, do it. Have a stronger foot inside of it. And it's going to and you will feel it. You feel that connection. And that's huge.
For any lifter, I think it's huge, because if you're going to walk out or take it out, you're going to have to feel the connection. And this is another thing just with lifters that drives me nuts, is the number of them that will get under a bar and not test, just put a little bit of force in the bar just to make sure everything is stacked right, is blows my mind. It's like, so you're just going to pick it up and then figure it out? You know, you're not going to like double check. It's just a second, even if not that.
I want to take a moment to give a shout out to my friends over at Mastonomics. I use their podcast a lot when vetting guests for the Table Talk podcast. I also listen to it a lot just because it cracks me up. Their YouTube channel is great. The podcast is on there, but they also have home gym reviews. Their apparel line is amazing. The standout products for me are these drink spotters. Rarely is it used for holding drinks. We have one on the monolift that holds the collars in between sets, smelling salts, chalk, whatever. You'd be surprised at how much crap you can put into one of these things. Their stall mat coasters they brought out last time they were on the podcast. These things are great. Check out their website, mastonomics.com, as well as their podcast and YouTube channel.
I want to go into, because we went with torso, we went with the foot. I want to go with the head, you know, and lats real quick, because we're going to take this full circle, because it all kind of comes together with what you have with your app.
Yep.
Right. Which is kind of what I've been building to, but I don't want to miss any critical components. And it may not even be actually the head and the lats as much as it is the actual bar path. Right. So I'll let you kind of take it from there, you know, as you were going through remodeling these lifts.
Yep.
Right. The head position becomes a weird one, right? Because a lot of people are looking at the head, but they're not looking at the spine. You know,
yes.
And that's what really matters, is what position that's in.
So it's more of the base of the thoracic output.
Yes.
So, because this is where a lot of people misunderstand what I say around head position, because they think that it's like cranking your neck down, looking down, or they think that it's a stacked neck is something like pulling that head back. I can move this head all around, but not optimize this position of where that spine is.
Yes.
So one of the things I like to do is, imagine that you're a Pinocchio, like project your spine through the top of your head, and then imagine that and let that kind of like hanging from the ceiling and get you into position. It seems really minor, but it really does have a major impact on your neurological output. And it's also tied, you can think about it with your tongue position. So pushing your tongue into the top of the mouth, and that can help with that as well. But these mechanisms have a relation to that diaphragm, and that when you're in the womb, the thoracic output is connected to the diaphragm. And there's just this intrinsic relationship, not to get woo-woo about it. But there's also, I was just having this conversation with Anthony on the way out here. Something that I deal with a lot of strength athletes is this cervical disc herniation issue. Why are strength athletes getting cervical disc herniations? Is it the forward head posture because they're bigger dudes? There's no load on that. Come on. What is it? Well, if you tie that and start looking at things, right? You've got this position maybe, because oftentimes it's to this elevated chest. We've also got a really big structure this way and not necessarily this way. Here, some of the largest and strongest ligaments in your body are connected to the cervical spine, to the rib cage right here. It's called the periocardial ligaments, and it supports the heart. And it's actually innervated by the phrenic nerve, which goes to the diaphragm, which also has, all of this is connected to the autonomic nervous system. So your sympathetic and parasympathetic, response. And if we're in this position and we've got all this stuff jacked and tight, I mean, that's pulling just massively, directly shear force on that cervical spine. So this gets back to, I mentioned Donnie Thompson earlier, as far as like the him moving right and teaching the athletes he trained with, like he didn't know the verbiage that I used, but I could see it in place. It was different than what I see the parroting people do, right? But the body tempering, just put a big ass heavy load right here and start compressing this rib cage, getting some pliability in it. And you're also going to immediately relieve this pressure on this periocardial ligament, and then also allow people to get in that position because they may not be able to because of that tightness. if you do that, if you find somebody that's like sitting in that position, and particularly somebody that is constantly on the sympathetic side of the nervous system, they'll have an immediate change. So this is also ties back to the shoes a little bit. The design partner is a gentleman named George Esquivel, and George is probably the leading men's fashion shoe designer in the world. He does the one-off shoes for all the musicians, and not all, but a lot of the musicians and actors. And, he's done the shoes for Tommy Hilfiger and The Rock, LeBron, a lot of actually the same Kabuki customers in the sports world, I think is hilarious. Cause I'm like, but you go down there and it's he's got outgoing shoes and the list of people on there. It's pretty crazy, but he came up and he'd been in back pain for 13 years, something like that, falling off of a ladder and has been in daily pain ever since. We did some work on movement. I just couldn't get him out of this extended pattern right here. And, some of the stuff going on, we did a big ass roller on the chest for 5 minutes. He'd flown in with his best friend since, childhood. He gets up and his friend's like, "What happened to you?" He's like, "You look like a different person." You could his whole posture, his visible energy changed. He's like, "I have to take a picture and send this to your wife. She's not going to believe what you look like." And he's like, "I'm not in pain." Anyway, that's how he got on board with the ideas around, listening and what I had to say on shoes and stuff, because literally it was a life-changing effect. But getting back, a lot of times you're locked into these positions here, again, all this stuff is kind of tied together, but it's also tied to the nervous system as well when we think about that connection. So getting here and here, aligning that so that we can get, because what happens is when we get that dissension of the diaphragm, a lot of people want to focus on the Valsalva maneuver and tightening this and that. I want to simplify everything down to the simplest possible things. If I can get in the right position and then just, cue expansion, all the other things, the outness, the thoracolumbar musculature, the obliques, the pelvic floor, all that stuff just happens in a co-contraction. We don't need to,
no butt plugs.
No butt plugs. It's just if we just allow those things to get into place and cue the least possible things to think about. You're under load. You can't think about the 100 different cues to think about. I can't think about 2, and then the other is the lats. The lats are a spinal stabilizer. A lot of people don't realize that. And you see that also often. And it's not a knock on Olympic lifting because the sport is different. But when we see a lot of them lift, and if they do a back squat, where's the failure mode? It's right here. Right there at the thoracolumbar junction, right? Not at the cervical I was talking about earlier. So that the thoracic outlet to the cervical is what I was talking about for the position. But the thoracolumbar junction here, they'll cave over like this, right? But we see them creating a lot of tightness, right? So you lift the bar up, this creates this tightness. Again, they're doing a lot other lifts as related to it. The lats are a spinal stabilizer. When you see people step out with the bar and their first move is this big, giant air into their chest, like this, they've lifted and elevated that bar and also disconnected this from the core. You're creating this sensation. They're like, well, it feels tight. Well, yeah, you put your arms in close to your shoulder, you pack all this in super tight, and you do create a lot of intrathoracic pressure, which is important, not just intra-abdominal pressure. Intrathoracic pressure is important as well. But with that tight position, the super tight, arms to elbows, the arms to shoulder, I can't do it because I have bad elbows. You're not in a position to have strength to engage the lats. Try doing a lat pull down. And this is how I teach people bar position. Do a lat pull down. Be in the optimal position where you can pull that elbow in towards your back and engage the lat. And you're going to pull that into the core. And then now we've got this shoulder connected in here. And that is a massive spinal stabilizer. You just have to make sure you do that not before you expand. Because if you do this first, what are you doing? Well, you're setting up on the bench press, which is actually pulling you into an arch. You don't want to do that. It's just a slightly different sequence of creating pressure in the body. Slightly different sequence, right? Other than that, it's the same exact steps on the bench press, the deadlift, the squat. They're all the same. It's how we're creating tension in the body. And if you do it right, the setup is really challenging and the lift just happens because there is literally nothing else to happen except for you to sit down between the hips. Stand back up.
Would you would you rather have a challenging lift?
I can't think about cues during the lift. So I set up, 4-step process. I set up, and then I can't go anywhere but having this perfectly executed. Like if I don't let loose the tension anywhere, I can't do anything but the lift.
All right. So now if we take all these components and put them together, it ends up looking like what your app that you just came out is.
The app goes way deeper. So it's a tie into also the speed component. So the app we're looking at, it's a kind of like a massive neurological like component tie-in as well. So the app has some proprietary tech to look at the bar and look at the plate on the bar and determine the velocity. So we're looking at velocity, range of motion of that bar so we can see the mobility, but then we're also looking at the joint positions as well and providing feedback, and also looking at, do we have issues going on with those where we've got weaknesses that we need to develop, and focusing the training program on it as well.
Well, those are the exact things that if it's an experienced powerlifting coach is looking at. Yes. Right? They're looking at what's the bar speed, what's the path of the bar, and if the bar is not in the right path, where's the breakdown?
Yep.
Right? So now you're able to take those metrics, measure those metrics, and then use AI to be able to help implement that deficit.
And it's, let's say, an experienced coach, because this is what I was saying over 10 years ago when people are going, I'm following XX, Russian protocol. And I'm like, you're following a program. Understand prescriptive versus descriptive. That is what a coach did with an athlete in a period of time as he was watching that lifter and determining that day, and maybe not even consciously, but his eye is good and he knows, like, we're going to do more, we're going to do less, we're going to put more load on the bar, we're going to call it at this point. And the documentation of that was captured. Descriptive of what was done. Now you're taking that because that's following whatever undulating recovery was going on because of what was happening in that lifter's life and nutrition and drug protocol and like all this other stuff. That's a description of what needed to be done during that period of time. And now you're applying that in a prescriptive manner to you, right? Versus trying to do the exact same thing, which is actually to analyze what's happening with your training. So our app is creating one-of-one program. Like, you get in there and it creates, we take some basic biometrics up front and look at training frequency, history, and build a program for you. And that program is constantly iterating. It's one of one. And it's actually changing during the course of your training, as you're training. Just for the day, it's only changing the loads. So it'll literally say, hey, next, it looks like you're good for more. Put 15 more pounds on, because we're able to use those objective measures of the velocity, just like I was doing back then. And then we're analyzing all this over time. So
it's doing it in a non-biased way, because when you were first doing it, you were doing it in a biased way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I follow it today because I know how amazing it is for me to have that level of detail, because we've broken down a taxonomy of all the lifts. So it's looking at the force vectors, the type of lift. We're looking so we can actually manage the load on the individual tissue, as well as what's happening globally, and manage that over time, as well as looking at subjective measures. So, get into fancy terms that we don't need to look
at. So optimally, they need to be a few mesocycles in before it's really going to start.
It just gets better and better, right? It just continually, it's learning what your adaptation is. And as your adaptation changes, it will change. So we have all this feeding into what we call a stress index. And there's a lot of things that could feed into that, right? So there's what we call a K value, which is, an assessment of all of those loads and where you're at now. Looking at Z values. So a Z value is going to be the difference in your perception of a load, right? So let's say a certain load is moving at a velocity all the time, or you're at the standard rate, but all of a sudden you're perceiving it to be higher. Like, that's really hard to capture as a coach going, over the last 3 months, like today, there's something going on that is causing you to perceive that as a greater load. Capturing those outliers. And that's where the AI comes in, because we can build, it's the algorithm would fill this entire table if we flowed this out. But this is everything over the last 15 years. And literally the last 10 years was the group of coaches that were developing this with all the statistical modeling that we were doing with our clientele. So we were building out all of that in a database and with a large client, validating that. And now we're taking that even further, because again, we did that with the velocity. You'd have to manually input that, but now we're adding in that ability to provide feedback on the movement, and then also refine that going forward. Hey, we're weak on this. We're going to add some different movements to build up strength in those areas. We're going to look at what is your preparation for the next training cycle and change your warm-ups based on that to add the cueing. Like it's absolutely crazy. There's nothing like what we're doing out there. And I think for me, the challenge comes down to one, articulating that. So that is a problem, because to understand the depth of what we're doing, somebody has to have a certain level of understanding.
Maybe, but if you just look at your story, right? So you have a decade of tracking your own training, at a level, this is prior to Kabuki.
Yep.
Right. So a decade of kind of figuring it all out, tracking it to figure out what metrics matter. And then you got a decade, in Kabuki, to where, yes, you have the products, but then there's also this coaching side, which is building upon that original base. So there's 20 years, of data collection to get to now this new decade, right?
And then not to mention the 2 full-time programmers that were working on the Velocity software separately for years.
So you see,
which then we partnered with them and spent another year pulling that all together.
So you see how it all stacks, though. So it may, as you become further separated from Kabuki, it may have been that middle step that was necessary to get to where it is now.
So that's where I view today that I can have a bigger impact, because to get the benefits of what I did before, somebody'd have to invest, $7,000-8,000 in,
which you invested way more than that.
All these bars, right? To buy this, and then versus if I can. In the day, that was my way to tap into the biomechanical components to reduce some of those things and build strength in the right areas. Where here, I can do that through load management and feedback on technique to a much greater audience for $29 a month. Mm-hmm. It's way more viable and way more cost effective for people to do that and get a better benefit of the same end objective of what I was trying to do.
Well, it can also scale without gigantic labor costs and steel and all the other logistics that have to deal with all that.
And I'm hoping that we can get into an exposure to a whole nother set of audience, because so if you can imagine like the clinical side of this, like, all the physical therapy and chiro centers that they've got clientele that they can't manage during the course, like they're doing their treatment, but they're not coaches. They don't know how to assign the amount of load that they need and the movements that they need through the week. They're giving them some rehab stuff, but we can make sure that they're loading appropriately once they get to that return to play. Or all the clinics doing the GLPs. Well, every one of the GLP medications says you need to be strength training in addition to this.
Yes.
Well, who are they using for that? Right. And I'm not like, I don't think that this is eating into people that are coaching. I still coach people.
No, they can use it as a tool.
No, it's an opportunity. How many people can't afford a coach, or a coach doesn't, going to a trainer at a gym at a certain location at a time, like, is not very convenient, that may fit in for someone that goes, hey, I found some time and here's a spot and I'm training at home, or I'm jumping in this gym. Like, there's a convenience factor there, and then that can lead to those other steps. So this isn't anything to replace any coaches or trainers. I think it's an adjunct to be able to reach people that wouldn't be reached, and get them exposure to understand and not hurt themselves, and get a tremendous progress and movement forward within our industry.
Well, that's the key thing.
I'm really interested in those, like, how do I get to these other outlier, like the people that don't know who I am or don't have any of that background, and maybe limited exposure to the strength training, because this is a massive way to deliver them results that isn't going to, overtrain them. Or again, they walk into some big box, gym with some 18-year-old trainer that thinks that running them into the ground is the way to go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's where, this just from Kabuki. I mean, it would be great for a competitive power lifter, but that probably made up like 5% of your total revenue.
I wouldn't recommend the product for somebody prepping for a powerlifting meet.
Yeah.
This is managing your training as it's not a powerlifting prep program.
Well, that's how most people are training though,
yes.
Right? They want to train, they want to get stronger, and they don't want to get hurt.
Yes.
I mean, and they take it more serious than the average Joe.
Yeah.
So that's the demographic.
Yes.
Right. That was your demographic for Kabuki as well.
Yes.
Right. It's just, there's a misunderstanding, to circle back to what we were talking about at the very beginning. There's a misunderstanding that 90% of the customers were competitive powerlifters, which is completely wrong. Yeah.
People always hit me with that and I'm like, the customers are not like, honestly, we're not powerlifters. Like, there was yes, we had those, but yes. It was everyone else that was around. Like I said, it was physical therapy clinics and rehab centers and college sports teams. That was massive for us. Pro sports was just fun to talk about, but they have really small. Yeah, they have really small weight rooms. Their orders were really small.
Well, it's a small demographic.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I worked with every major league baseball team. Like, what's that? 50 bars?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. The getting into the peptides now, because I think that was one of the topics that you wanted to talk about. I'm a peptide idiot, right? So junior high level. So what's the deal? Like, as you started with those before everybody else.
Yeah.
Which is interesting how popular they become and how mainstream, almost mainstream.
Yeah. I mean, it
really
was very gray area for a long time.
Black.
Yeah. You didn't talk about it. Right.
Yeah.
And now it's completely shifted, which is crazy. So yeah, I finally did a write-up on this. I was down in Texas at John Wellborn's Power Athlete, and I was in the vehicle with him and Kelly Starrett and a few others, and there was another high level coach who was injured and coming back, and he's like, "Hey, can you guys send me that protocol? The one that everybody uses?" And they're like, Kelly and John look at each other. They're like, "You know who wrote all that, right?" The one that's been getting passed around for years, and they're like, "You really need to get out there and push this." And it was kind of an eye-opening moment for me, realizing it was a time and place to do that. And the fact that, because I am honestly really frustrated with the clinical level of care, and not necessarily where it's at, but the fact that we have the ability today to heal tissue directly and do it in such an amazing, fast manner that yet we're cutting people up. We're shooting cortisone. We're doing these things. And we're doing this sometimes. Like I said, the frustrating point for me is people that do this for a living and a livelihood. You can take somebody and have them back on a field in a couple weeks and heal them, but Instead, we're doing things that potentially, damage them for the long term, or don't get them back there. Because some of the case studies I had talked about, like I can't talk about all of them, and there are only people that allow me to talk about. But Travis Rogers detached both quads, right? So he's in a hospital. He's has to learn to walk again. He's in a wheelchair. Like they just surgically attached both legs, both quads. And I had him start the protocol. And again, the protocol includes more than just peptides. It's all more of this. So I'm just talking about the superhuman healing. I'm going to get into more cellular medicine and cellular health, and I think the future of where peptides are going here in a minute. But I just want to talk about the superhuman healing protocol because it is available to anybody for free. I sell it too. If you want to pay me, it's $15 for the ebook on chrisduffin.com. But if you just want to go join the forum, it's posted for free on the forum, which is free to join as well. So I've got a bunch of free stuff on there and anybody can go have access to that. But just as a frame of reference, I won't use myself. I'll use a couple of I could tell my stories. But we started Travis on that protocol. And in 12 weeks from the date of surgery, and you can go on his Instagram and look at what I'm talking about, he was deadlifting 700 pounds. And weeks after that, shortly after that, totaled like 2134. So we're talking 0.0001% of the population for strength in a matter of weeks. Now compare this. So if you pull, and I actually in the Superhuman, I pull the clinical research on this. In the normal standard of care, 60% of people never return to full function without pain or stiffness. Being able to walk at 6 months is standard. Like at 2 years, when I say forever, I mean 2 years, 60% of people are still don't have full range of motion or stiffness or pain. That's normal. So being able to walk at like 6 months, without pain for like 2 miles is considered good results. And now we're talking about, doing phenomenal levels of strength in a matter of weeks from being in a position of learning to walk again. So again, he's using some of the things from not just the cellular standpoint. So back up. What are peptides? Peptides are in our body right now. Peptides are naturally occurring amino acid chains. So we have them. And the things for normal functions, like they're in our food, our body creates them themselves. And also the world is our provider. I was having a conversation with Sheena just before that. She was asking me and I explained it and she's like, oh, so God provides us everything. I'm like, yes, because we get all these things to empower greater, cellular health and longevity from our environment. They come from very simple things. The foods that we eat, if we're eating, high quality whole foods, they come from getting and being in sunlight, powering our bodies, powering our mitochondria. We're just like plants. The light comes into our body and it powers us, right? And we also do it through grounding, like being able to touch the ground and discharge. That is like, these are normal things. For those of us that live in the Northern Hemisphere and have a genetic history through our mother's side, which comes on it only passes down the mother's side, but there's a halotype to your body based on your origins, where we have had less sun exposure being in the Northern Hemisphere, where having exposure to the cold during the winter and having exposure to the food groups that are available during the winter cues the body to emit light internally. This is how infrared works, by the way. They discovered this in the 60s. Our bones are literally emitting light and they're triggered to do so. So the problem is, well, one, there's nothing wrong with enhancing all these mechanisms. I'm all for that. But two, in the world that we live in, we're also, there's so much that's working against us. like, the electric devices, the lights with the wrong exposure, the walls limiting the sunlight, the shoes on our feet and the asphalt on the ground, the food that's available. All these are cutting down these processes, and we can see it like in the data. Like, so if you have genetic halotype, origins around the equator, if you are living, in Ohio, you will find very significantly a higher incidence of chronic disease, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, straight up, well proven. Further, those people live north in Canada, so on. Like, we've got massive disease because we're starting to have those cellular breakdown because they're not acclimated and their halotype doesn't trigger those responses from the cold. But same thing, if we bundle up during the winter and we live in this nice cozy house and we're not eating the foods that trigger, we don't get the cold exposure, it's not triggering that stuff either. Again, lights, all this other stuff. So there's reason. I know this doesn't sound like it's peptide related, but a lot of the peptide focus, so the peptides from the healing standpoint that I was talking about, those are doing things on a cellular level. Sometimes, so I break down. So everything that I talk about is in 4 categories, the different areas. So we've got cellular function, we've got neurological, which is tied to some of the other discussions that we were just talking about, how to tap into the neurological system via peripheral inputs and loading. We've got biomechanical, so joint positions, fascia, how that moves. And we've got, I call it hydrodynamic, but that's the movement of fluids and nutrients and waste products within the body, right? So I break down everything into that, right? So if I do a peptide injection in a local spot, it's going to do some things with like creating angiogenesis. So it's going to create formation of new blood vessels. It's going to grow all the microcapillaries, which one? It's going to feed nutrients into the area. It's going to stimulate the removal of the waste products, which you have post-surgery, right? It's going to organize the cells so that they know and communicate and do the healing processes as well. It's going to reduce the inflammatory markers, which are going to inhibit or promote the pro-inflammatory that is needed, again, to drive those signaling processes. So it's all working around signaling. And it's actually the same signaling. Like when you train, it produces peptides to body, and these same signals happen in the course of this. So there's multiple. So there's multiple ways to communicate these same things. This is why I do, I'm a proponent of blood flow restriction. This is why I had the 3-handled bells and the Kratos flywheel that allows me to push into fatigue to a deeper state and the signaling that happens with it. It's why the VasoBlitz product with all the nitrates in it, that again creates some of the hydrodynamic pieces to fuel the muscles and repair mechanisms, right? So that's what those are doing. Now, when it comes to and this is my focus today, is around more of quality of life, longevity, reducing chronic disease, delaying the onset of aging. And that doesn't mean these, I'm going to live to be 200, but all these things I talked about are reducing age. If you have chronic disease, and you can feel it, it's as you age or even not as you age. Let's say you're lifting heavy, you're under massive amount of stress from work or life stresses and all this stuff. And you start getting, what do you get? Brain fog kicks in, low energy. This is showing that lack of cellular function that's happening. It's not just the food that we eat and again, those hydrodynamic forces, but the cellular level, what's happening at those cells. So a lot of what I'm doing is around mitochondrial peptides. Mitochondria are often known, they call it the powerhouse of the power, but they do, here's the thing. Mitochondria does way more than create ATP. So mitochondria is you can imagine this little engine. It literally is like a turbine engine. It's pretty cool. And it transports electrons. It creates this gradient of energy that then drives this ATP generation. But the mitochondria, when we've got poor cellular function, starts having dysfunction. And it has methods for repairing itself and also biogenesis as well. And so understanding how those concepts work is important. So there's a lot of people talk about mitophagy. That's one leg of the three-legged stool that mitochondria has for repairing itself. So mitochondrial health and dysfunction is like directly related to chronic disease, the aging process, and your wellness and vibrancy and well-being. Like, see the shirt I'm wearing? I didn't pick this, got this for my birthday. Like, I haven't been out here for years. And if you look at a picture last time, or a video last time I was here, I'm older, but I'm younger. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the reality of it, right? And that happens not maybe because I was aging faster than I should have been. Why? All the stress, all the drugs, all the, like, let's just be honest, like poor choices as it relates to that. But we can drive those processes to be better. So how those work, so it's not just the mitophagy, which is, the clearance of bad or dead cells. So the clearance of bad mitochondria. But there's also a fusion process and a fission process. Not nuclear, but similar, right? So I just want to explain those really quick before I get into like what we're doing and some of it, where I think this is next generation cellular medicine. This is like what's emerging today is absolutely amazing. I'm really excited for the future because we can target tissues and start like healing heart tissue and kidney tissue. And like, it's crazy. Start working backwards on the aging process. And at least, like, I'm not saying, living forever thing, but like being where we should be, where nature provides us that we should be. Right. And so if we look at that, the fusion process is like a recycling. You've got a mitochondria, it's got some damage over here. It's got a broken engine, but the transmission's good. And over here, you've got a good engine and a bad transmission. It'll take those and pull them together. So when the body senses that need we can drive this fusion process, it'll come together and it'll put the spare parts together and create one larger, higher functioning mitochondria. And actually those that are fused together will create a network that will be more energy efficient because they'll use their shared resources. And this is really for transporting electrons within the body, creating the energy, creating ATP, creating a stronger membrane within that mitochondria, which across that electron transport chain where this stuff just kind of moves along.
Our strength equipment is made in the USA. It's professional rated. We customize it to whatever your needs are. If it's just logoing to designing a completely brand new piece of equipment. The reason I got into the equipment game to begin with is a lot of the equipment I was looking for example, like a leg press, I couldn't use a wide enough stance to help build my squat out. So a lot of the equipment that we've come up with and that we've put out is built for that reason, because it wasn't on the market or it was built like crap in the first place and didn't have any carryover. So check out our website, elitefts.com, strength equipment, or get a hold of one of our strength equipment specialists who have been selling strength equipment for over a decade, as well as being coaches in the industry. Website, Top Toolbar Strength Equipment, or look for the rectangle on the front page that says Strength Equipment Specialist and click on that to speak to one of our specialists today.
The other side of that, though, is that we do that if we drive a lot of fusion, we also create waste products. And then too much of those waste products is going to drive inflammation and, other things. So you also have to balance that with the fission process. And that's literally where the mitochondria split off the bad parts. And now we've got a bad one. And then that disappears via the mitophagy process, right? So that's just a quick,
That's the three legs.
What's that? That's the three legs. That's the three legs of regeneration and repair of mitochondria.
Yeah.
And if we're not able to do that, that's where we start getting, a lot of bad mitochondria. That's where we start getting the cellular level dysfunction. And you'll see that, like, you'll get people like, I have people send me their blood work, look at it. It's like, all right, we've got this group of stuff. Like, we've got hyperlipidemia, we've got prediabetes or diabetes, we've got like high inflammatory markers. Start making a few changes in supplementation even. Let's add some acetylene L-carnitine. Let's put some ketones at these different times. Let's create a little bit of fasting here and to move your training here. Let's add some peptides. And all of a sudden, a couple months later, the doc's like, I don't understand what you're doing. We're pulling you off of your diabetes medicine. You're pulling you off your, your lipid medicine because we're not treating the disease, we're not managing the blood sugar. We've created better cellular level function that was driving the
issue in the first place.
Yeah. And that's just phenomenal. So there's a lot of different peptides. So if we get back to like the superhuman healing, I'm using BPC 157, TB 500. A lot of people know about those. One of the ones that I've used for ages that now that I've published it, I'm starting to see some of these people inserted, but like GHK-KU. I want to talk more about that one in a bit. And then incorporating those, again, with some training methods or other things that are driving some of those same processes. I incorporate that with, like, there's a lot of other tie-ins to this, to mitochondrial function, cellular function via red light therapy, PEMF. I'm a big believer. I actually owned a clinical version of a PEMF because nobody really used them much, but during my grand goals, I was using a PEMF. So it's a pulsed electromagnetic frequency mat. They're pretty common, like kind of in the anti-aging wellness circles now. When I was using it for grand goals, it was like, I don't know, it's probably like 10 grand for the unit I had.
Yeah.
But I didn't talk about it because I don't like promoting things that are not viable. Like the cost benefit for that at that time, it wasn't worth it. Why am I going to talk about this thing? Like, oh, you should go buy this super expensive thing that delivers a result, but it's not that big of a result to drive that, right? I'm not going to promote that. Now they're very reasonably priced, but it's facilitating some of those same things, from inflammation to upregulating the mitochondria, again, from the hydrodynamic piece of like creating more vascular flow, particularly in the microcapillaries. So again, now we think about, okay, how do we combine that with, nitric oxide? How do we, combine that with, I also use shockwave, which can create more localized nitric oxide production. That's one of the things in my superhuman healing protocol. If I've got post-surgery, we're usually doing shockwave after our peptides as well to drive those deeper into the areas along with the penetrant, but also because it's creating some of that local level of angiogenesis and local nitric oxide production, as well as some of the calcium ion signaling for some of the repair processes. So I think that's the unique thing where I come from, Dave, is I'm not a peptide guy. I play in a lot of realms, and I think pulling these together in a comprehensive set.
Well, I wonder though, with that, because I know a lot of people that have used BP 157 and the things that you're talking about with no result or very little result, but they're not using other modalities to help drive that.
Yep.
Right. So I'm wondering if you went through that same path. Like you try to use that and it's like, shit, this isn't doing what I think it should do. How can the same way if we're go way back and you just try them tons of anabolic steroids.
Yep.
Right. This isn't doing what can I do to make this work better or actually work the way it's supposed to work? But say with the anabolics, my environment, the way I'm eating, the way I'm sleeping is making it not do shit.
Yeah.
Right. So you just take more, feel more like shit. And then you realize maybe I just need to sleep more and hydrate.
Yep.
And then you much lower dose. Oh my God, this stuff really works. Is it like that?
Yes. So I want to touch base on that but when somebody says it's not working, ask them this question: what was wrong? And listen, I hear, well, my shoulder hurts, so I injected it in my shoulder. Well, what was wrong with the shoulder? Well, it hurts and it didn't work. Well, if you don't know what you're fixing, is it the right modality? Because again, that could be tied to a neurological, which could have been some peripheral, and I could actually have resolved that by doing some skin pulling, and because it's still some hypersensitization remaining in that peripheral network, and because some of that signaling creates tension in the nerve. So both the nerve channel as well as the peripheral nerves, a lot of it in the fascial and the skin layer, that retains some stiffness, and you can usually feel it. Like I could grab the skin and pull on it and you feel like, oh, that's stiff and burny. Oh, that feels fine. Well, that tells me something right there. Well, I could try injecting all I want. It's not going to do a damn thing if I've got a movement or neurological problem.
Yeah.
And so understanding, like, do I have a tissue healing problem? These are like, you have to know what you're working with first. And that's, every time I encounter that, well, it didn't work for me, and I ask what it is, they've never gotten a diagnosis. They're just, well, I heard these heal and I've got something that hurts.
Yeah.
And I'm injecting that. Well, what do we know that we're missing? Like we've got to know if we're using the right tool for the job. But yeah, the comment on the anabolics, like there was a couple years there where I used a massive amount. I was working with a bodybuilding coach, you know the one, and he's like, "Oh, you're barely running anything," because I most of my career didn't run a lot, and then I started using what he was doing for a couple years, and yeah, I got stronger on it, but I couldn't train as much because I was lethargic. I didn't feel good, and the net result was the same as far as the level of strength, because I was getting more results from the less training, but I was training less instead of training like a madman when I felt great. And so like when I did grand goals, I was using 1/10 of what I used during those highly competitive years, which is great. I mean, 1/10.
Yeah.
And I was able to, now obviously I was only focusing on one lift at a time. You know, I was still working on a lot of other key, factors, not like I was just squatting, although there was periods I was just squatting and deadlifting. But I could have felt better, and at a way lesser dose, by being able to eat without because I wasn't having to force food because my appetite wasn't crushed. I could sleep, like all those other things. So yeah, there's a certain.
Well, didn't those other things become higher prioritized too?
Yes.
Because of the way you were laying those goals out.
Yeah.
Because they were long term. Each one was like a year, right?
Yes.
Right. So when you're laying something out for a full year, the way you're going to periodize, the way that's going to look is going to be completely different.
Yes.
Especially with those goals, because they were giant.
Yeah. No, that was a large structured, like year-long process for each of those. And actually, I guess it would go back later. It was almost a 5-year process, but some of those years were very less focused, other than like, I know I need to work on this, but I'm doing some things that are fun that fall within that realm, which is more mindset. Like I just can't stay, like you can't be in competition mode all the time.
Yeah.
It just doesn't,
yeah.
You got to have time for the soul, man.
So where do you see the future? Because you're talking about the future of peptides.
Yeah. The future of peptides. So there's 2 that have come out recently that are really, really incredible. One of those is SLU PP-332. So it's known as what's called an exercise mimetic, because it stimulates a lot of the same processes as exercise. So it's going to promote AMPK stimulation. So a lot of the same thing that happens, which is going to promote glucose uptake into the muscle. Fat, it's going to burn fat oxidation. So you can see how that it's going to help with being lean. It's going to work on consuming triglycerides. It's also going to signal reactive oxygen in the positive manner in the muscle, the way that it would be while we're training, which is same with the calcium signaling. So it's sending these signals directly to the muscle and to fat oxidation like we're training. At the same time, it's also creating a futile cycle within the mitochondria. So a lot of this is just more kind of like performance aesthetic. I haven't got to the longevity and health quality side, but it's going to stimulate this process where the mitochondria is burning a bunch of energy. Like we're sitting there in a car, with the engine revving, and that's going to burn yet more fat. So it's an incredible compound from like a training perspective. And I can tell you for a fact that this last Olympic cycle, there was a lot of Olympians using SLU because it's a peptide. that is not an anabolic substance, that is delivering a lot of performance when you combine it with also training. I don't recommend taking an insulin, an exercise mimetic and not training.
Yeah.
To be clear, I'm not trying to do that. So obviously you can see really great effects as for athletics and body composition, but that driver, when it's creating that energy, is also driving that fusion process. So it's driving that recycling and repair, which again, that's going to deal with chronic disease. It literally makes it harder to get COVID or COVID, SARS. It's going to help you recover from things like that cause a lot of mitochondrial dysfunction. So you would be use it post same time. Anything that's going to improve those energy systems, it's going to make that energy system more effective. So you're going to have more cognition. It's going to help repair cognitive function. It's going to help repair cellular function. It's going to drive the repair processes of fusion in the body. It's also going to create some waste product as it relates. So you need to have some of the mitophagy as well. So BAM15 is like one that you would employ as a counterpart to that. Not at the same time, because it's doing the opposite. So that'd be like, sitting there, revving the engine all the way to max, and you're going nowhere because you're not in gear, and you're just going to wear out your engine and get nothing done. You don't want to run these two different. So, because it's an uncoupler. You're familiar with DMP, right? Mm-hmm. So DMP is an uncoupler as well. Now, DMP creates a lot of excessive body heat, has a lot of danger of killing you as it relates to that. It's also toxic. So BAM15, I was watching research on DMP for a lot of years, though, because it was really promising for some of the things that I was looking at, which is for liver issues, and for diabetes. DMP can be used in a very targeted manner. I don't recommend it, by the way. But I was understanding the mechanisms of uncouplers. So uncouplers allow some leakage of those electrons across that chain. And that is going to, again, stimulate that ATP process. But it's more of like SLU is like a ramping up. SLU is going to give you energy. You're going to have great, training. It elevates your nervous system a little bit. BAM is a little bit more of a slow down. So you take BAM on your off days. So BAM was developed as the safer version. And I think the research came out in 2018. Actually, I'm stealing that. On the drive-in, Anthony and I were talking about this. I've got Anthony Castor over here, if he ever wants to weigh in. But both of us saw the research because both of us had been watching some of these, technically bad substances that could be used in alternative ways. And so BAM15 is unique, and it has a very short half-life. So it clears your system. It doesn't have toxicity. It doesn't have and in fact has positive health ramifications over DMP's negative health ramifications. It also has 7 times the oxygen consumption. So when it comes to like consuming energy, it doesn't produce the heat, but it stimulates that fission process where the mitochondria is splitting off those bad parts and breaking those away, and then feeding the mitophagy, so the disposition of those bad mitochondria. So the other thing that BAM15 does is around glycation mitigation. So people may have heard the term AGEs. They're basically glycolation byproducts. They're hugely inflammatory. They're a driver of a lot of disease process. And unfortunately, like as strength athletes and things in that nature, a lot of what we do is highly glycolytic, right? The other way, and that produces, use of glucose to create ATP. We think we create like 4 ATP for each glucose. But the other mechanism is oxidative phosphorylation, which Anthony might have to correct me, but it's like 12 or 16 ATP. per, and that is way more energy efficient. That's what's consuming. And so switching the systems over. So BAM15 drives that oxidative phosphorylation, which creates a lot more what we call metabolic flexibility. So BAM15, these are huge products for being able to drive basically longevity, chronic disease mitigation, being able to repair these things at a cellular level that are driving these processes in our body. And the SLU is really interesting. So the SLU targets the ERR alpha receptor, which if anybody looks into that, they go, oh, that's an estrogen receptor. Why do you want to cue it? It's not tied to estrogen. That's the receptor. And that receptor resides in every part of the body. So this is where SLU is showing really great promise at basically healing kidney dysfunction. You can target it with other, so this is how you can drive if you combine this with other, other mechanisms to target tissue to be able to repair.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying what you're watching, make sure to take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe.
Let's say I want to repair my vision. Might get some PPC and TB 500 drops for my eyes and take some SLU and, do some, challenging look at work and rubbing my eyes and a few other things. And all of a sudden I'm going to be growing a cornea and maybe not needing glasses anymore, right? These are the things of where we're going. Thinking as I'm talking, like I'm thinking about that Star Trek episode, I can't remember the movie, and they came back in time and somebody's in cancer in a waiting room and they're trying to go through the hospital and the doctor says, this is terrible, hands them a pill and it's like, they're healed,
Well, what are the roadblocks then for these advancing?
Well, they're moving forward right now at a pretty rapid pace. Like these things are available. And the protocols, and that's what I'm trying to do is share some of the protocols because there's also a lot of misuse of that. So like there's people that are combining SLU and BAM together, like in the same capsule. You don't want to do that. Driving those processes together is going to do the opposite of what we want. You don't want to do things that are going to cause a lot of that accumulation, may lead to cancer. We need to understand how to strategically utilize these products and also making them available. They are hard to find. And I am selling these products. Yeah. Guess what? Okay. We invested a lot of money in being able to get the cost in a reasonable manner by investing, 6 figures in raw materials to be able to, encapsulate this and have it, tested by third-party FDA approved labs and be able to get these things to market so that one, people have a quality, reliable source over something that sketchy, you don't know, and also just promoting how to use it properly. Because last thing I want is people using these compounds and, just like the Vibram story, they didn't do the education when they came out with the shoes and they ended up with a bunch of people injuring their feet or tearing their, tearing their Achilles and all this because they didn't do education. And I've always been education first. And I've always chased things that I'm passionate about.
So how does the dose response change if you're going through the gut as opposed to injecting?
The injecting is a little bit more efficacious. So at the end of the day, it would be a little bit cheaper if you went that route, but we've chosen not to, because there's not that much loss in efficacy, but also just the convenience and understanding the end market of.
Well, I'm just wondering how
the need, like getting away from a needle. Cause here's the other thing with where peptides are going. Peptides are going the route of oral, transdermal. That's the path. I think within the next year or 2 years, you're going to see a publicly traded peptide company hit the market.
Well, it has to go that route, because the average
and I don't say that out of nowhere. There's billionaire investors investing in this type of technology right now because they see where this is going.
Well, my question would be how much is being destroyed as soon as it hits the gut, because you're dropping it in acid, compared to injecting it into tissue.
Yep. We're seeing really great results. And I think all BAM 15 out there is oral, and the SLU, we've been using an oral for quite some time.
What about the BP 157 and those?
Yes. So that depends as well. So BPC 157, I'll use as oral, particularly for GI issues. It's really phenomenal. It is actually a gastric, that peptide is in the gut. It's produced in the gastric process. It's absolutely phenomenal. I've got a client that's had Crohn's disease for decades. He's a high-level masters powerlifter, and he every 3 months or so he ends up in the hospital, like with his Crohn's. Or, well, every 2 or 3 months he misses like a week of training. A couple times a year he ends up in the hospital because he misses a dose, of his pretty heavy medication. Mm-hmm. And so I've had him on this last cycle taking an oral BPC, KPV, PEA, lorazepam, and butyrate product. And he was traveling, missed his dosage, missed it again. And he's calling me going, what the hell did you do? Because I'm okay. Like 100, like I should be in the hospital right now, but I'm not. And that's what so there's times and places for oral versus the injectable. I do a lot of those injectable just because that's what's available right now, but many of these can be changed to nasal, transdermal, drops, just depending on the delivery mechanism. And that's where things are going. So right now, and I think as we see this enter the more standard population, that's what the technology that is going to be invested in to allow people to make it more accessible. Because that's definitely one of the drawbacks I have with people is their unfamiliarity with needles, reconstitution, dosing. Like that's a big hesitation point as well. It's not for the people, it's not for the people on.
Yeah.
Right. But if we go into the standard population like that's even though peptides are now becoming really commonplace knowledge, like there's so much, it's crazy how fast just in the couple years that has changed. But there's a place. It depends on the delivery mechanism. Well, you can't just take one that is an injectable and go, I'm going to take it orally.
Well, with that growth of that's also become the growth of a bunch of bogus shit too.
Exactly.
How does one go about navigating this field?
I think it's really important to know who you're buying from and ensuring that they've got COAs on their product. So certificate of analysis done by a third-party lab. Right. That's important to know. Most of the raw materials are all coming from the same places. So even just somebody says, well, I'm making it, it's made in America. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. They actually still have the same raws here and they processed here. Or it can be, well, I'm getting this from, I'm getting this from the pharmacy. It's going to be better. I've gotten a lot of bad tests from pharmacy over what I've made myself. So I'd rather do myself because I can put it in the a C8, C10 caprylic acids will reduce inflammation and then I use gosh darn it, argon.
Well, with the powders or the orals, is there cross contamination?
Yes, cross contamination. So there's a lot of the big pharmacies that are using they're compounding overseas, and there's very little oversight. The owner of the Waste Well covered this really well on a Rogan podcast, that, some of the significant contamination and other issues in some of the major pharmaceutical brands. So just because it's coming from that, I honestly am less trustworthy of that than someone that I know their supply chain and they're managing it and they've got the COAs. Right. But it is a big issue. There is so much muck, particularly in peptides and the injectable peptides. If you look at that, buying anything off of Amazon, sketchy as shit.
Yeah. Were there any other topics you wanted to go over I didn't bring up? I'd say
while we've touched on a couple things. So I want to touch on methylene blue for a minute.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, I'd like to hear about that.
Just because RFK is using the methylene blue doesn't mean you should, okay? Like I cannot get on the methylene blue bandwagon. Like anything, there's a time and place. Just like I said, there's a time and place for wearing some arch supports and some cushiony shoes. There's a time and place for methylene blue. Like it is going to, just like it's going to do some of the same things that we just talked about with those mitochondrial peptides around improving the efficiency of that electron transport chain and the mitochondrial function and energy production, right? That's good. I've post-COVID, take some methylene blue. Using it in general to do that, it has so many negative repercussions because it downregulates nitric oxide production. So we're affecting the endothelial cells of the heart, the brain, like all these areas. And that just, to me, I can't get over, like, why would I want to do that? I mean, literally, I've created products the opposite of that, like, you know, L-citrulline, alpha-ketoglutarate, betaine anhydrous, like, my Vasoblitz mixture, getting into the hydrodynamic stuff, like the feeding the tissue, supplying nutrients, getting good turnover. Like, again, that's massive for your heart function. Like, we want nitric oxide production to support good vascular health. We want it for the brain. Like, these are all really critical. And so that's why I said I wanted to get back to GHK-KU earlier. So one of the other benefits of methylene blue is the upregulation of the mitochondrial sensitivity to sunlight. Well, GHK, well, actually, I guess I don't have any studies referencing that it does. Try it, and you'll see that GHK-KU is blue, by the way, too. But it has positive ramifications on nitrogen oxide production, upregulates it upregulates that sensitivity. Maybe it does. I'm gonna have to check my research on that one, whether I've got some validating research to that. But I know for a fact, if I take GHK-KU, sit in a red light, go to sleep, my HR values shoot up. If I have somebody else do it, it does that as well, right? I see an improved output of the function of the red light therapy when I use that as an intervention. When I employ GHK, let's say 30 minutes before that. So using GHK is, to me, a far superior methodology. Again, a lot of my approaches up front, they're opposite of what some of the bandwagon is, but that's my reasoning behind the methylene blue. It's just it is a big bandwagon thing that everybody's on, and
it's a big one right now.
I tried to, like, I'm coming out saying exactly the opposite of that, and I've been saying that for a while in my community, and people have been disagreeing. Now some of those people are coming around, agreeing with me now, right, Anthony? On that one. So nitrates, lactate, upping that nitrogen oxide, GHK-KU, that is like the Vasoblitz product is like the standalone fundamental product I recommend most anybody that's trying to do any optimization to do. If you're doing TRT, you're going to get, if you're having a good, like anything that you do, it's going to enhance that because we're enhancing the volumization. Like we've got more nutrients, more glucose, you got fuller muscle bodies. That looks good, but it also means you're less likely to injure yourself. You're going to train, you're going to get better results from training. You're going to recover better. I mean,
so essentially you're moving nutrients through the system more efficiently.
But it's so here's the thing. So a lot of people put those products in pre-workouts with all your stimulants, but then you're only taking it on training days. It's a chronic loading product like creatine. So the studies that actually show the enhancement in muscular endurance, in anabolism, in hypertrophy, those are all done after loading continuously for 3 weeks. So when I created the Vasoblitz product, it was the first product on the market of that type that was a daily use product, which is why it doesn't have a stimulant in it because it's a daily use product. So anybody doing that, please follow, again, the strategies, the protocols are really important for that, whether you use mine or somebody else's product, understanding those mechanisms. And then same thing, when you put it with a pre-workout, there's different levels of sensitivity to the pre-workouts, right? So people might only be doing a half dose or training 3 days a week. You're never ending up with the saturation level that you need of those components to get those results. And I particularly, because carnivore is so hot, anybody on carnivore needs to be taking those products because you're flat, it's affecting your performance. Like you're just like, it really enhances, anybody that's on those low carb, keto, carnivore type diets. But I think anyone that is focused on, like these are fundamentals, creatine and a really well-rounded nitric oxide formula, one that is particularly hopefully hitting both separate pathways of nitric oxide production like I'm doing. I also put lactate in there. People don't realize the benefits of the lactate and the impact that it has. That's actually particularly in the brain as well. Muscular endurance. There's a lot of things as it relates to that. I don't think anyone else actually uses that, but it's incredible. I challenge anybody to try my product for a month and not. Shit. I didn't mean that to be a whole product pitch piece. I was going to talk about methylene blue, nitric oxide, but it all ties back to the same. And we touched on PMF. I want to talk about that because that's one of the things I've never talked about. My use of the PMF mats before, again, for that reason. I've really been playing around with them. So the newer ones are cool. So the clinical one I've got, it's got these set programs in it, and I've had it for a long time. Like I said, it was really great for my recovery during that really challenging stress cycle when I was pushing crazy loads. Like, I think that maybe something that people don't understand about my training for those is it's not like the 1,000-pound squat, but what I did to pull that off. When you look at those training cycles, the fact that I was doing, 9 sets every single week, over 970 pound or 9 reps, 3 sets every single week. When I was doing the 1,000-pound deadlift cycle, I was doing 12 to 15 sets off of a block, and then once a week, and another 9 to 12, reps, off the floor every week. We're talking 850 plus from a deficit at those repetitions, 950 plus for those amount of repetitions every week. Like, that was challenging. So I found that product to be really great, but being able to tailor the frequencies is really phenomenal. So like when I made this recent career transition, there's a lot of stress. And so I started using a lot of stimulants, not something I would recommend, but I went really heavy and I'm like, I'm just going to do this. And I'm like, it's going to be a challenge when I come off. And the time I came off became, it just happened by accident because I started using the PMF, and I use the PMF, which is great. So if you're using red light, I like recommending high frequency. So having a unit yourself is really beneficial. So understanding that the window of the growth hormone release. So this is a good time. We'll talk about red light and PMF. Is that all right?
Yeah.
So strategies for red light. So it's really interesting understanding because there's these red light, not saunas, but, places you can go where they've got the really powerful, they hit you. But if you're going there once a week or once a month, it's only doing so much because it's only operating. You're really seeing that elevated growth hormone. The studies are like 3 hours after, it shows a 300% increase in stem cell release. And that's just with a little panel, like on somebody's tibia. But that starts tapering off. So that's like a 6 or 8 hour window of effect. So even if you did a super powerful one, you've got this small window where the microdosing of that, and then also tying it to your circadian rhythm if you can. So even if it's a lower powered panel, once a day or twice a day for 10 minutes or 8 minutes is way more beneficial because you're doing that in that the dose response is just way more aligned. You're keeping that elevated all the time. So when I have people with chronic issues, so, we're dealing with, back pain that's been going a long time. We've dealt with a lot of other stuff, but we've got the healing side that we're doing some peptides. We may put the red light in there. I mean, it surprised me how effective the red light has been, because the red light will downregulate, it'll bring your pain sense. You'll feel better immediately, but you've got, the release of that. You're also cueing, again, improving the mitochondrial function, because we're feeding those mitochondria with photons. And then the PMF can be done at the exact same time. So from a lifestyle, intervention standpoint, it's like lay on the PMF mat with the red light on you. You've not.
So what's the half-life of the PMF then?
I don't know what the half-life of the PMF is. I'm just recently started pulling, because I used that heavy, that was like 6 years ago, right? And now I've just started getting back into it. Typically they recommend twice a day. So I haven't looked into the impact of that. And it's more recently that I became aware of some of the other benefits, as far as, like, again, the inflammatory or cytokine reduction side of it. I was doing a lot of it for the vascular blood flow, which, by the way, it cues well with using nitrates. Like, they all like it, and you can feel it too. If you take some nitrates and get on the PMF mat, like, you'll feel that even more, like when you go to train, right? It's really cool. So implementing that at that same time is a really great addition. And it had.
So how were you implementing that? Was it pre-training, or was it recovery, or was it all?
So I like to do it in the morning. So first thing, and I run the PMF at a high frequency. So running it at like 30 hertz. And so this is how I accidentally came off caffeine, because I was just downing caffeine all day long. I just do a light dose in the morning to get started and not get too ramped up. So I woke up, had a shot of espresso after I did my PMF and my red light. I'm working all day long, and normally I'm like, by 10 o'clock, boom, I got a pound, 200 milligrams, and then pre-workout, so on. I get to the afternoon, I'm like, oh, I haven't had any caffeine today. Like, and then I just stopped. All I'm taking now is just like my morning shot of espresso. And if I'm training, I'll add in some pre-work, just because I like to get a little more jacked up for training, but I don't even need to. Like, it's crazy. I just went off that first week. Like, the first day was by accident. And then in the evening, I run a low hertz, somewhere in like the 2, 6, or 8 range for hertz, which you can feel it, like, it'll almost put me to sleep sometimes. I'll get in there and it'll just like knock you out. If I run it too low, it really does that effect. You can run a little bit higher, and it kind of stimulates, like, if I want to be doing more creative thinking, if I'm doing some planning or just reflecting on things, I'll run it a little bit higher, maybe 6 or 8 hertz, and it kind of stimulates that process. And it'll do that, more of the cognitive function at the higher frequencies too, but that's why I run it, like, I ramp it all the way up in the morning.
So when you have all these things running together, how do you know what's making the difference and what's not?
Well, I've been using, I've implemented them in a series.
Okay.
Yeah. So like I said, the PMF, I just started using again. I've had the clinical one, and then I didn't use it for the last year because it broke. So I've been using the red light the last 6 months with great results. And then I added the PMF back, and that's why I'm just getting back into my research on the PMF. But I've already used the PMF in relation to nitrates, in relations to peptides before, independently of the red light.
Back
now
to the Grangle.
I'm adding that back in, and then playing around, because the newer units, they're way cost effective now. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars. Like, you can get a mat for $500-$700 or something like that. And, really nice one for like $1,500. That's the one I use. But they also have the controls for instead of these built-in protocols, just, you can dial in and play around with those frequencies, which I'm really loving as well. So yeah, just getting onto some other mechanisms and how to employ those things. Again, I think hopefully you're seeing kind of the theme of where I'm focused. I'm getting older, obviously, but like, I just want to feel good.
Yeah.
And live well. And that's where I'm at right now.
How can people go about finding not just you, but your products? And because they can go to Chris, you're easy to find.
Yeah.
It's just Google you, right?
Yep.
But when you get into the footwear, the supplements, the peptides and all that,
So yeah, one advantage of, leaving that one company that was really like demanded I be wholly with that is I have a chrisduffin.com website. And on that, I've got a lot of the Barefoot and BuildFast products, or you can just link through from there if you want as well.
So they're all there.
They're all there. I don't have all the products of each of those brands on there. I've got, so one of the innovators in a red light company, he's Dr. Rahul Desai. You should have him on your podcast. So he's really great on the red light. He's a regenerative guy that has done a lot of stuff for some top people. He's got a unique scaffolding mechanism. You need to have Rahul on. Okay. But he's behind the company called Red Vive. So those are on my site too. You'll actually find his panels. His panels are one. So a lot of the panels out there are focused on kind of really broad spectrum. And that broad spectrum also means it reduces the output in the ranges that you need. So he has the best for musculoskeletal regeneration, but the best price is actually on my site.
Right.
So
the best place to follow you would be Instagram.
So Instagram is the best place, but just go chrisduffin.com, barefoot shoes and barefoot boots. All our leathers are made here in the US actually. So for our boots and everything. So that's really cool. And Build Fast formula, again, linked on my site. LiftLab app, which again, you can find on Instagram. You can find on its own webpage, but LiftLab app, but it's linked off of my page as well. And then if you want some guidance personally, I focus on kind of resilience coaching. So I'm managing like this, helping people restore their health, but also if you need help on the, other things in life, I've got that whole curriculum that I teach at UC Berkeley around resilience, built on the 6 Ps framework and how to move through these challenging moments in life, business, relationships, and just wherever people need to be met at. I build resilience. I'm your resilience kid. I'm your guide.
Hey, got a gift for you here. It gets tied up. There's a shirt in there. There's a training log in there, which the log is made by Pioneer.
Oh, nice.
Pioneer.
I do.
Then I have a coin in there that says live, learn, pass on, which I only give those to people that I feel embody the vision and aim of why I founded the company in the first place. And you do that in a incredible manner. So I want to thank you for everything that you've done. Any final thoughts that you have as we close up?
I was really excited to come out here. Your motto, live, learn. Your motto has always stuck with me, and it's been great to know you and be associated with you. And I really respect what you're doing, how you're doing it. And yeah, it's been good to call you a friend, and I appreciate it. Like I said, I've been looking forward to this.
Thank you. And guys, we're done.
All content you see on this channel and at elitefts.com is created by, take a guess, Elite FTS. If you want to help support the content, head over to elitefts.com and pick up literally anything that you need to be able to get more jacked and strong.